Hey guys, tonight we start in the mud. Not metaphorical mud, the real stuff. You're standing ankle deep in a sludgy English lane in the year 1765. It smells like wet sheep, coal dust, and maybe just a hint of raw sewage. The air is damp enough to chew, the sky is a constant gray smear, and every chimney for miles is belching a kind of smoky cough into the clouds. You squint toward a low stone building by the river. It hums, not with bees or birdsong, but with something alien, a mechanical roar stitched with the clack-clack of iron gears and spinning wooden shafts. Inside, the water frame, a new kind of monster, one that drinks rivers and spits out yarn faster than 20 spinners combined. You don't know it yet, but you've just stepped into the front line of the Industrial Revolution. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is. So drop a comment and say, "Hi." Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The world is changing beneath your wooden clogs. 100 years ago, everything was made by hand. Shoes, nails, buckets, linen, you name it. Someone squinted at it by candlelight, sweating through hours of labor for one day's worth of product. But now you've got machines chewing through flax and cotton with a hunger that feels almost alive. Let's set the stage. It's Britain in the mid-18th century. The roads are muddy, the horses slow, and the fastest way to send a message is to yell really loudly. But something strange is stirring in the countryside. People are building odd contraptions with wheels, flywheels, pistons, and belts. Not for show, for profit. You've probably heard of James Watt. Yeah, he didn't invent the steam engine. Thomas Newcomen beat him to it by decades. But Watt made it work better. Smaller, more efficient, less of a wheezing beast, and more of a sleek power plant. And when Watt's partner, Matthew Boulton, starts mass-producing these beauties in Birmingham, well, things start to accelerate, literally. Water wheels give way to steam. Cottage industries, those sleepy, family-run spindleries, start to shrivel. The factories are coming, and with them, the rhythms of life are about to get upended like a dinner table in a tornado. Let's take you inside one. You duck beneath a low wooden beam and step into a textile mill. It smells like grease, sweat, and old wool. Everything vibrates. Wooden floors tremble as giant looms clatter like deranged typewriters. Cotton fibers hang in the air like mist. You cough. You rub your eyes. You glance at the kid next to you, maybe 9 years old, guiding shred into a whirring shuttle. Fingers one slip away from amputation. This is Arkwright's world. Sir Richard Arkwright, hairdresser turned industrial tycoon. His big brainchild? The factory system. In 1771, he opens Cromford Mill in Derbyshire. It's not just a building. It's a machine that houses machines. Dozens of workers under one roof. Every move controlled by bell rings and shift horns. And guess what? It works. Profits skyrocket. Production multiplies. Soon, dozens of mills pop up across Britain. Rivers are dammed, hills flattened, villages swallowed. People pour in from the countryside. Why? Because machines don't pick their own cotton. and someone's gotta keep feeding them. And sure, some say it's progress. Others, not so sure. Let's pause for a strange detail. Cow hair and urine. Yep, when early textile makers needed to full wool, basically clean and thicken it, they'd mix it with a delightful slurry of stale urine and cow hair. Fullers would stomp the mix with bare feet in giant vats, singing weird songs and developing truly alarming foot conditions. All in a day's work, really. This is what pre-industrial labor looked like. So, when you compare that to a roaring, gear-clacking machine that never sleeps and doesn't mind the smell, you start to see why capitalists went all in. But workers, they had thoughts. You wake up in a damp room, straw mattress, barely enough coal to heat water. You trudge to the factory before dawn. 16 hours later, you stumble home, fingers raw, lungs coated in cotton dust, ears ringing. It's not glamorous, but it's new. For the first time, the common worker isn't making things for themselves or their neighbors. They're cogs in a production line. This, dear listener, is the birth of industrial scale. Factories aren't just changing how people work, they're reshaping where they live. Whole towns swell into cities practically overnight. Manchester, Leeds, Birmingham, they don't just grow, they explode. Streets widen, tenements rise, sewage struggles to keep up. And somewhere in the murk, a new class forms. The industrial middle class. Merchants, engineers, overseers. Not quite aristocracy, not quite laborers, but powerful, ambitious, and often terrifyingly ruthless. Historians still argue whether industrialization improved life immediately or ruined it first. Some point to skyrocketing wages, others to plummeting life expectancy in factory towns. It's murky, like cough-inducing, coal-smeared murky. But one thing's clear. Everything's connected now. You can no longer make or sell something without dealing with someone's machine somewhere. And if you thought this was big, buckle up. The real shockwaves are still coming. Picture this, a canal in the Midlands, 1790. You're loading barges with iron, coal, timber. Everything moves slower than molasses in January. But suddenly, rumors float in. A new kind of transport. A road made not of dirt, but iron. And on it, a steam-powered wagon. You laugh. Then you see it. A locomotive. Clumsy, loud, and glorious. And though it won't catch on for another couple decades, it hints at what's coming. Movement at the speed of industry. But don't get ahead of yourself. Right now, we're still in the age of spindles and soot. Another quirky sidebar before we tuck in deeper. Crocodile dung as contraception. Totally real. In ancient Egypt, women used it. And while it has absolutely nothing to do with spinning jennies, it's a solid reminder that humans have always been weird, inventive, and occasionally gross. Which is exactly what this revolution thrives on. The messiness of trial and error. Back to the mills. By the turn of the 19th century, textile exports are booming. British factories churn out cloth faster than ships can carry it. Cotton is king. And where's all that raw cotton coming from? That's a tale for Section 3. And it's not a pretty one. But before we go there, look again at this smoky, clanking, strangely alive world. You're not in some pastoral village anymore. You're in the heart of the machine, breathing in progress and trying not to choke on it. You wake to a whistle. It's not birdsong, not church bells, not the sleepy creak of wagons on a muddy road. It's metal, shrill, artificial, and inescapable. The factory shift is starting, and every worker in your block jolts upright like a nest of startled cats. The Industrial Revolution has not only rearranged your tools and tasks, it's taken aim at time itself. You shuffle through the brick streets of Birmingham, soot settling on your shoulders like dandruff from the sky. The chimneys are already roaring. A chill wind bites through your wool coat. And all around you, men and women in flat caps and aprons trudge toward jobs inside buildings that never sleep. Welcome to the empire of coal and steam, where wheels don't just turn, they conquer. Let's rewind for a second. Coal. You know it now as that lumpy black stuff in your uncle's shed, or maybe as the villain in every climate change headline. But in the late 18th century, coal was everything. It boiled water, powered engines, lit streets, and warmed homes. More importantly, it drove industry. Without coal, steam power would be nothing more than a clever pub trick. With it, you could move the world. Take canals. Before trains muscled their way onto the scene, canals were the highways of Britain. Narrow boats laden with ore, timber, bricks, wool, and barrels of who knows what glided silently across the countryside, pulled by exhausted horses clopping along the towpath. The canals were marvels, cut through hills, lifted by locks, and stitched together like veins feeding a growing heart. The Bridgewater Canal alone slashed coal prices in Manchester by half when it opened. That's not progress, that's alchemy. And yet, canals weren't enough. Enter the railway. It starts humbly. Wooden tracks, horse-drawn carts, the kind of stuff that feels like a toddler's toy in hindsight. But by the early 1800s, iron rails begin replacing wood, and a few madmen, George Stephenson among them, have a dream. What if steam engines didn't just power textile machines? What if they moved things? You're standing at the edge of a new line near Stockton, 1825. People laugh. Others tremble. The locomotion number 1 wheezes and shudders like an asthmatic dragon. But it moves, slowly, awkwardly, but faster than any horse cart on record. Within 5 years, the Liverpool and Manchester Railway opens, a miracle of engineering and foreshadowed disaster. It's the world's first modern intercity railway. And yes, it works. Goods fly down the track. People too, sitting in open carriages with soot in their eyes, and hats flying off in the breeze. There's one snag. The very first railway fatality. William Huskisson, Member of Parliament, gets too close to the track and is run over by Stephenson's rocket. Modernity arrives with steam and also runs you over if you're not paying attention. But the accident doesn't slow the revolution. Quite the opposite. Railways spread like wildfire. By the 1840s, a railway mania sweeps the nation. Speculators throw fortunes into rail stocks. Engineers dynamite through hills, throw bridges over rivers, and stitch the kingdom together with iron thread. Suddenly, you can travel from London to Edinburgh in a day instead of a week. Markets bloom. Fresh milk appears in towns hundreds of miles from the cow. Newspapers arrive before the events they're describing have even cooled. Time itself changes. Before railways, every town kept its own clock, local time, based on the sun overhead. But if a train is coming at 2:15 sharp, your 2:11 won't cut it. Enter Greenwich Mean Time, a standardized system enforced not by decree, but by the schedule. You're not just wearing shoes made in another town. You're now living on imperial time, and the Empire loves it. You board a coal-powered train with crates of iron goods bound for the coast. The shipyard's waiting. Once the cargo's loaded, it sails to India, Jamaica, South Africa. Manufactured goods go out, raw materials come in. And Britain? Well, Britain booms, factories swell, railways extend like nervous systems across the aisles. Shipping ports grow tendrils that reach continents. British steamships command the seas, cutting journey times in half. The empire is no longer a patchwork of colonies. It's becoming a machine, too. Each cog turns another, and it all starts here, in the black dust of a coal mine, in the hiss of a pressure valve, in the shriek of a whistle that wakes the entire block. Quick weird fact break, sure. Ever heard of tunnel sickness? During the building of the first railway tunnels, like the terrifyingly long and dark Standage Tunnel, workers reported hallucinations, dizziness, and full-blown hysteria. Some claimed to hear ghosts or see fire snakes riding along the tunnel walls. Historians still argue whether it was coal fumes, methane pockets, or just the psychological horror of digging blind through living rock. But either way, one thing's clear. Railways messed with your head. Now, if you think the railway was only a British affair, hold your steam whistle. By the 1830s, countries across Europe begin laying their own tracks. Belgium industrializes fast, becoming the continent's first to mimic British-scale steam. France follows with style and bureaucracy. Germany, fragmented but fiercely technical, pumps out steel, builds rail lines, and starts dreaming big. Prussia, Saxony, Bavaria, they all want in. And behind it all, coal, iron, steam. Now, steam isn't just powering machines, it's powering nations. The ability to move goods and troops quickly becomes a military asset. States start laying rails, not just to connect cities, but to strategically dominate regions. A revolution that began with looms and spindles has quietly become a blueprint for geopolitical power. You feel it every time the tracks hum under your feet. The empire isn't just measured in red lines on a map now. It's measured in miles of railway. Still with me? Let's zoom in. Imagine you're a young lad or lass working in a railway workshop in Crewe. You're 17. Your job is to polish engine pistons until they gleam. One day, you hear a rumor. A train is coming through at over 50 miles an hour. You scoff. That's impossible. A horse would fall over at that speed. Then you see it. A black beast of iron and steam thunders past the platform, trailing a tail of smoke that curls like a war banner. You don't breathe until it's gone. Your ears ring. Your skin tingles. You've just seen the future, and it's fast. Speed becomes obsession. Every year, trains push harder. London to Brighton, 2 hours, then 1, then 45 minutes. Why stop? Time is money. And now, money rides on rails. Let's close this one with a final glimpse. It's the 1850s. You're standing on a railway bridge near Glasgow as the sun sets. Below you, a steam engine howls past, sparks flying from its wheels. The air smells like scorched metal and damp moss. Above you, the stars begin to appear, indifferent to this loud, sweaty species down below, racing faster and faster towards some unknown destination. And you're in it. No longer watching history. You are history. A part of this whirring, clanging symphony of progress. The tracks don't end here. In fact, they're about to cross oceans. But that's a story for next time. You're standing in a cotton field. The sun is cruel. Not warm, not cozy. Cruel, like a weight pressing down on your skull and shoulders. The air tastes like dust and a dry bite of iron. Rows of white puffs stretch to the horizon like clouds that forgot how to float. You bend to pick one. The bowl is soft, almost tender in your hand. But the husks are sharp, little thorns designed by nature to fight back. And you're not alone. All around you, others stoop in silence, dragging sacks, sweat slicking their backs, fingers bleeding from the day's harvest. You're in Georgia, or maybe Mississippi, or one of the dozens of states where cotton is no longer a plant. It's an institution, and like the smokestacks of Manchester or the rail lines of Liverpool, this field, this brutal, silent field, is one of the hidden engines of the Industrial Revolution. Let's talk about Eli Whitney. The year is 1793. Eli's hanging around a plantation in the American South, looking at a bowl of cotton like it personally insulted him. You see, the kind of cotton that grows plentifully in the US, short staple cotton, is nasty, full of sticky seeds. It takes hours to clean just a handful. So, Whitney builds a machine, a box of wood and metal teeth with a hand crank and a combing drum. Crank it, and out spits clean cotton, 10 times faster than a human could manage. The cotton gin, short for engine, becomes the game changer nobody saw coming. Well, almost nobody. Plantation owners take one look and go, "Oh, we can scale this." And scale they do. Here's the kicker. People often think the cotton gin helped end slavery. You know, less manual labor, fewer enslaved hands needed. Right? Wrong. It supercharged slavery. Suddenly, cotton became insanely profitable. You could grow more, harvest more, clean more, sell more. Textile mills in Britain were foaming at the mouth for raw fiber. The result? A land rush. Southern plantations gobbled up territory. Enslaved populations ballooned. The US South became a cotton kingdom, ruled by cruel arithmetic. More cotton, charred more profit, more enslaved people. By the mid-1800s, America was shipping millions of bales to British ports. Liverpool became a cotton hub. Factory wheels in Manchester spun 24/7 to meet demand. And on the other side of the ocean, human beings were shackled to that supply chain. Literally. You see where this is going? The Industrial Revolution didn't run on steam alone. It ran on cotton, and cotton ran on slavery. Historians still argue whether the gin was a technological blessing or a moral catastrophe in disguise. It probably depends which end of the whip you were on. Let's get into a bit of geography. The American South had the climate. Britain had the machinery. The Atlantic was their handshake. But they weren't the only players. Enter India. India had been growing cotton for thousands of years, long before Europeans figured out what to do with the stuff. They'd spin it, dye it, weave it into muslins so fine they were called woven wind. Seriously, one square of Bengal muslin could pass through a ring. But when the British East India Company moved in, that whole system flipped. Indian weavers were pushed out of business by mass-produced British cloth. The British bought raw cotton, sold finished textiles, and forced India into the role of supplier, not manufacturer. You can almost hear the loom shudder in protest. Quirky side fact for your sleepy brain. Some early British cloth was so heavily starched to mimic fine Indian cotton that it would crack when folded. People would wear stiff, squeaky shirts that sounded like they were rustling paper every time they moved. Imagine trying to flirt in a garment that crinkles like a sandwich wrapper. Anyway, the global cotton triangle was now complete. Enslaved labor in the Americas, raw cotton shipped across the Atlantic, industrial looms in Britain, and finished goods dumped into colonial markets. Everyone was making money, except, the laborers. Let's peek inside a Lancashire mill, 1830s. You walk in, and the first thing you notice is noise. Not a dull hum, a full-body roar of wood and iron clacking together, like 100 typewriters arguing at once. Cotton dust floats in the air, sparkling in the shafts of gray light. Workers line up along power looms, hands moving fast, too fast, because slowing down gets you fined, or fired, or worse. A girl beside you, maybe 12, leans too close. Her braid catches in the belt. You look away. This is the other side of the cotton boom. Long hours, child labor, hearing loss before age 20, cotton lung, acidic sweat burning through cloth, and every bit of it feeding the insatiable appetite of factories, rail cars, and stockholders. But from the outside, it looks like progress. You leave the mill and catch your breath near a canal. Crates marked New Orleans, Savannah, and Bombay sit stacked like playing cards. You realize something. This isn't just a town. It's an interface. Raw material in, labor in, finished product out. The world is turning into a machine, and cotton is its wiring. Even art and literature can't escape. Charles Dickens' characters struggle against soot and hardship, sure, but they also wear cotton shirts. Karl Marx writes Das Kapital using data from British textile reports, and American abolitionists begin publishing scathing pamphlets connecting your Sunday tablecloth to a slave's torn hands. By the time Queen Victoria takes the throne, Britain is producing half the world's cloth. That's not industry, that's domination. Let's detour briefly for something surreal. In the 1850s, fashion-forward Europeans start wearing crinolines, those enormous hoop skirts made of stiff cotton. They're majestic, they're impractical, and they're also flammable. Dozens of women die after brushing too close to fireplaces, their entire skirt igniting like a torch. Newspapers warn readers to approach the hearth with care. But fashion doesn't yield to common sense, and neither does industry. Now zoom out. Ships leave Liverpool full of calico. They head to Africa, India, South America. They undercut local weavers, flood markets, and destabilize economies that have been humming along for centuries, all in the name of British cloth. The result: economic dependence, broken traditions, and in some cases, famine again. The revolution's reach isn't confined to smokestacks or gears. It wraps the planet in cotton, yes, but also in systems, hierarchies, and debts. And the machine, still hungry. Final scene of this chapter. You're walking a quiet path in the English countryside. The grass is green. The sun is setting behind the hills. And yet, off in the distance, you can still hear the low whistle of a train. Somewhere, a loom is still spinning. A ship is loading bales. A boy is picking seeds from cotton by lantern light. And you realize, this isn't a moment in history. This is a network, one you're tangled in, whether you feel it or not. And the thread, it's cotton. You don't own your time anymore. Sure, the sun still rises and sets, but that doesn't matter. Not here, not now. You live by the bell. It rings at 5 a.m. to drag you from sleep. Again at 6 to march you into the factory. Again at 8 for your measly breakfast. And then, well, you've lost track. There are too many. Each one blares through the streets like a judge with a stopwatch. This is life after the cottage and before the union. Welcome to the world of clocks and punch cards, where every second is owned by someone else. Back in the old days, just a couple generations ago, you woke up with the rooster, worked your farm or your trade, took breaks when your body told you to, and called it a day when the light ran out. It wasn't easy. It wasn't always fair, but it was yours. Now, you live on mechanical time. You punch in with a paper slip. A foreman checks the clock. You're 3 minutes late. That's a shilling gone. 10 minutes late? Don't even bother showing up. You're not an artisan. You're not a villager. You're a human gear in someone else's ticking empire. It didn't happen overnight. At first, the machines just helped. A spinning jenny here, a steam-powered loom there. But slowly, the machines took over. And as the machines got faster, so did you, whether you liked it or not. It started with Richard Arkwright, remember? He wasn't just a wig maker turned industrialist. He was a schedule genius. His factories ran on strict routines. Workers lived in company housing, followed company time, even bought goods from the company store. It was part business plan, part social experiment, and it worked. Arkwright's mill churned out profits like butter. Other manufacturers copied the model. Within a few decades, time discipline became as important as the machines themselves. You don't rest when you're tired anymore. You rest when the horn blows. There's something quietly horrifying about that, isn't there? Imagine being a blacksmith or a spinner in the early 1700s. You might work 16 hours, sure, but some days, only 6. You could pause to drink, stretch, chat with neighbors. And then the factory arrives. Now your natural rhythm gets overwritten by a bell. Your instincts replaced by a whistle shriek. By the 1830s, British workers were clocking 12 to 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. Children as young as 5 spent their lives bent over looms or crawling under machines to fix threads, sometimes losing fingers, or worse, you don't even eat properly. Many mills installed mealtime boxes, enclosed booths, so workers could scarf bread and tea without contaminating the factory floor. And as for bathrooms, forget it. You go when it's allowed, and it's not allowed often. Light joke time. Sort of. In some early factories, management locked the outhouse. Workers had to request a key to relieve themselves. And if they took too long, their wages were docked. Imagine your bladder being part of someone else's business model. Capitalism, bringing you profit margins and kidney infections since 1771. This time, tyranny spreads fast. By the 1840s, clock towers rise over every mill town. Not for decoration, for control. Workers set their pocket watches by the factory bell, not the sun. Bosses carry stopwatches. The entire day becomes a grid of tasks. When to show up, when to eat, when to stop. Every wasted second costs money. And here's where it gets even weirder. This obsession with time doesn't stay in factories. It infects everything. Schools adopt timetables. Trains run by the clock. Even churches shift their services to suit industrial hours. The sacred now bows to the scheduled. Historians still argue whether this new punctuality was a tool for order or a subtle form of social control. Probably both. Let's peek inside a textile mill's schedule, just to feel the chill. 4:30 a.m. Wake up, eat bread. Maybe tea if you're lucky. 5:15 a.m. Walk to work. It's dark. Foggy. You trip on a dead cat. 6 a.m. First bell. Machines on. 8 a.m. 15-minute breakfast break. You eat standing up. 12 p.m. Half hour for lunch. Bread again. Maybe cheese. 12:30 p.m. Back to the floor. Don't be late. 6 p.m. Machines off. Blistered hands. Deaf ears. 7 p.m. Back home. Sleep. Repeat. If you're a child, your day is just as long. And if you're a woman, you get to go home and make dinner too. The word you're looking for? Relentless. And yet, out of this misery comes something peculiar. Efficiency. By cramming every ounce of time into neat little slots, factories start to optimize. They cut waste, reduce downtime, track performance. It's not long before managers begin charting graphs, calculating labor minutes, and eventually developing punch cards. Herman Hollerith, a data nerd before his time, creates a punch card system in the 1880s, not for factories, but for the US Census. It was designed to tabulate millions of data points quickly using machines. But factories take note. Soon, companies are using punch cards to track employee hours, production stats, and even bathroom breaks. The worker has become a line on a graph, a column in a ledger, a unit. Let's pause for something delightfully strange. Some Victorian factories issued workers time tickets, little tokens with a hole punched through when you arrived. If you lost yours, you weren't allowed in. One poor fellow was so desperate, he forged his own tokens out of biscuits, baked, stamped, dried overnight. He was caught when the foreman tried to punch it, and the thing crumbled. Efficiency meet carbs. Now step back a moment. Imagine you're a weaver in India, or a potter in China, or a farmer in Poland. You've never seen a steam engine. You wake with the sun, rest at noon, follow the seasons. Then a shipment of British goods arrives, cheaper, faster, mass-produced. You can't compete. And soon, you're forced to adapt. Not just in trade, but in time. The factory bell rings across oceans. Even at home, rebellion simmers. Workers start pushing back, demanding breaks, shorter hours, fairer wages. One of the first big wins. The 10 Hours Act of 1847. It limited the workday for women and children in textile mills. Not great, but better. Unions start forming. Whispered meetings in pubs. Leaflets passed hand to hand. By the late 19th century, the idea of the weekend is born. First just Sunday, then a half Saturday. Eventually, after years of protests, debates, and strikes, we inch toward the 5-day week. But don't get too cozy. You're still clocked in. And the clocks? They're still ticking. You sit on a factory stoop as the sun goes down. Your ears ring. Your joints throb. But the bell is silent. For now. Around you, rows of brick chimneys glow in the fading light, like battlements of some vast mechanical kingdom. You pull out your pocket watch. 5 minutes until curfew. And for once, those minutes are yours. The city doesn't breathe. It grinds. It hisses. It leaks. Steam from underground pipes. Soot from brick chimneys. Coal smoke from firelit forges. You walk the streets, and they pulse like arteries. Horse carts rattling over cobblestone. Factory bells clanging. Boots thudding in tight rhythm. And beneath your feet, miles of sewage, cellars, and forgotten tunnels. This is a living city, but not in the wholesome sense. It's more like a beast. It eats coal, drinks water, and sweats 10,000 people a day. Welcome to the urban sprawl of the Industrial Revolution, where the cities grow teeth. Once upon a time, most folks lived rural lives. You grew food, knew your neighbors, maybe milked a cow before breakfast. But the factories changed that fast. By the early 1800s, cities like Manchester, Birmingham, and Glasgow exploded in size. Manchester alone grew from 25,000 people in 1771 to over 300,000 by 1850. That's not growth. That's a detonation. You can practically hear the bricks being laid. Tenements shot up like mushrooms. Quick, cheap, flimsy. Streets went unpaved. Water pipes lagged behind demand. And sanitation? Yeah, that's where the teeth come in. You turn down an alley in Leeds. The walls are slick with grime. Children dart between shadows, barefoot and grinning. A rat the size of a football lumbers past like it pays rent. Chamber pots empty from second-story windows with a splash and a curse. You leap aside, too late. The smell, unforgettable. You pass into the heart of a slum. Inside one building, 6 families cram into a single floor. There's one shared water pump. No toilets. Entire neighborhoods have no proper drainage. And that stink that lingers in your nostrils? That's not just filth. It's danger. Disease spreads like gossip in places like this. Cholera hits in waves. In 1832, it sweeps through Manchester and kills thousands. No one knows why. Some blame bad air, or miasmas, or even immoral living, because obviously, disease would never afflict the virtuous. Others just shrug. It's the price of progress, they say. Only later do they figure out the real cause. Water. Contaminated, untreated, and drawn from the same river people dump waste into. Good times. One physician, John Snow, maps out the cholera cases in London during the 1854 outbreak. He traces it to a single water pump, removes the handle. Boom, cases drop. It's the beginning of modern epidemiology, and also a sign the city might be alive, but it's also sick. And yet, people keep coming because the countryside's worse. The Enclosure Acts push peasants off ancestral lands. The price of bread skyrockets. Agricultural jobs vanish as machines replace plows and scythes. So what do? You pack up your family, board a cart, and head for the city. Because the city, filthy, crowded, brutal, is also hope, a job, a wage, maybe a future. Let's check into a lodging house in Glasgow, 1840. You pay a few pence for a spot on the floor. Not a bed, a spot. Some places rent out shelves and wall cubbies. Others offer rope beds, where you sleep sitting up, draped over a slack rope, strung wall to wall. When morning comes, the rope drops, and everyone topples to the floor. Wake-up call, industrial style. And if you're a woman, you might be working the same shifts, earning half the pay, then heading home to cook, clean, and care for 5 children in a single room. You don't rest, you rotate. Let's lighten the mood with something odd. In 19th century Paris, the city tried to manage urban smells by installing perfume fountains. Seriously, they'd spritz rose water into the air near meat markets and sewage drains. Did it work? Not at all. But it made people feel better about stepping in things. Britain didn't get that fancy, but they did eventually invent the flush toilet, thanks to brilliant weirdos like Joseph Bazalgette, who built a massive sewer system under London. He didn't just drain the filth, he redirected history. Cholera rates dropped. Life expectancy rose. Cities became survivable. Still, class divides never felt sharper. You climb a hill in Manchester to an estate where smoke curls from ornate chimneys. Inside, plush carpets, bone china, gas lamps. A maid hands you tea. Meanwhile, down the hill, a 6-year-old with rickets coughs blood into his shirt sleeve. The rich don't just have money, they have distance. Their air is cleaner, their water purer. Their windows face gardens, not brick walls. The rest? They survive in shadows. One newspaper in 1849 described the divide like this: "In this city, the streets of the living and of the dead wind so close. One hears laughter and coughing in the same breath. And yet somehow, life goes on. There are butcher shops and singing taverns, cricket games in narrow alleys, steam-powered trams filled with squabbling teenagers. There's music, sometimes, a fiddler on a stoop, a street performer spinning jokes in grime-streaked clothes because people adapt. Even in places that grind you down, people find ways to dance." Historians still debate whether industrial cities were engines of progress or monuments to misery. Some say they lifted millions from poverty. Others call them open-air prisons. They're probably both. But no matter what side of the debate you land on, the cities themselves endure. They shape modern life, its rhythms, its architecture, even its attitudes. When you walk through London or New York or Kolkata today, you still trace the paths laid down by soot-covered dreamers and desperate migrants 2 centuries ago. Every street has a story. Most are unpaid. You end the day on a factory roof, watching the sun disappear into the soot, the chimneys silhouette against a deep orange sky. Far below, the city churns and rattles, breathing in bursts and clouds. You hear voices, distant, exhausted, determined. The city doesn't sleep, it hums. You wake to a rhythmic clatter, metal against stone, wheels on rails, steam bursting like a kettle, left too long. It's not a dream, it's the railway age. And you, my friend, are about to ride the iron veins that pump life into this new industrial world. You stand on the wooden platform of a country station, the air tense with anticipation. Somewhere down the tracks, a beast approaches, hissing, shrieking, and belching smoke like a dragon with clockwork lungs. It's not just a train, it's the future, and you're about to step aboard. The invention of the steam locomotive doesn't just change travel, it reprograms time itself. Before the railways, time is a loose, local thing. Noon is when the sun hits a certain point. Every village has its own version of now. But then, the trains arrive, and with them, the need for synchronization. That's right. Trains invent standard time. Without it, you'd have a train leaving Bristol at 1:45 and arriving in London at 1:30. Confusing? Dangerous? Absolutely. So in 1847, Britain rolls out railway time. By 1880, it's national law. Minutes become fixed. Schedules become sacred. The world runs like a machine. Because, well, it has to. You don't miss the train. The train misses you. Let's talk locomotion. The first steam-powered railway for passengers launches in 1825. The Stockton and Darlington Railway. Just 25 miles. Slow, bumpy, revolutionary. But then comes George Stephenson, a name you'll want to remember. He builds the Rocket, a beautiful, noisy, downright stubborn piece of machinery that becomes the standard for future locomotives. It's fast for its time, 29 miles per hour, and about as comfortable as riding a mechanical bull across cobblestones. Still, it's a hit. By the 1830s, Britain is laying down track faster than any other country. And what follows? Commerce, coal, letters, people, ideas. Suddenly, a journey that took days by coach takes hours. Your world just shrunk. It's not just Britain. Railways go viral. France, Belgium, Germany. By 1850, Europe is crisscrossed with steel. In the United States, railroads are a different beast altogether. Massive, wide-reaching, and sometimes downright lawless. The Transcontinental Railroad, finished in 1869, links the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. It's not just a marvel of engineering. It's a manifest destiny on rails. But here's the uncomfortable bit. Many of these railway lines are laid by immigrants, prisoners, and enslaved people or indentured laborers. In the US, Chinese workers labor under brutal conditions in the Sierra Nevada. In India, railway construction disrupts ecosystems and villages. While carrying out Britain's colonial ambitions, it's easy to marvel at the trains. Harder to ignore who paid the price. But let's ride one, shall we? You board a third-class carriage in 1840s England. It's wooden, drafty, and you're sharing space with dirty strangers and one stubborn chicken. A porter with a soot-covered hat slams the door. The whistle shrieks, and you're off. The landscape blurs past. Hedgerows, fields, smoking factories, telegraph poles ticking by like metronomes. It's dizzying, exhilarating, slightly nauseating. A man next to you is praying. Another clutches his chest like he's just seen God through the window. People used to say train travel could damage your organs or make you insane. Quirky tidbit alert. Some even believed your face might melt at high speeds. Spoiler, it doesn't. But fears aside, the Iron Horse wins hearts. Stations become cathedrals of motion. St. Pancras, King's Cross, Grand Central, massive halls of glass and iron where thousands pour through each day. Merchants, lovers, soldiers, pickpockets, nuns. The platforms are alive with shouts and whistles and luggage-laden chaos. Railways birth a new kind of city, commuter towns, where people work in one place and live in another. They enable tourism too. For the first time, average folks can visit the seaside or the Lake District or Paris if they're feeling fancy. Beach towns, boom. Ice cream becomes a national pastime. Oh, and trains invent the railway sandwich. Cold, soggy, mysteriously egg-like, universally hated. But it's not all holiday snapshots and synchronized watches. There's danger. Early trains derail often. Boilers explode. Signals misfire. One infamous crash in 1842 kills over 50 people and horrifies the public. But the industry learns. Block systems, telegraphs, emergency brakes. And slowly, train travel becomes not just fast, but safe-ish. Still, don't stand too close to the edge. And definitely don't try to hop between carriages. People did that. People lost limbs. Historians still debate whether the railway was the Industrial Revolution's greatest invention or simply its loudest. It's hard to argue with its reach. Every factory, farm, port, and city hums more efficiently when tied to the rail network. The train isn't just changing how you move, it's changing how you live. Let's zoom out for a moment. You're in 1851, visiting the Great Exhibition at the Crystal Palace in London, a magnificent greenhouse of steel and glass filled with the spoils of progress. One of the biggest attractions? A model railway. Miniature locomotives zip around like clockwork toys, wowing both children and barons alike. You realize then, the train is more than a machine. It's a symbol of control, of power, of modernity. Every empire that wants to be taken seriously builds a railway. But there's a darker side to connectivity. Railways become tools of colonialism. The British lay thousands of miles of track across India, not to help locals, but to extract resources more efficiently. In Africa, lines cut through tribal lands without consent. In Australia, they slice through sacred indigenous spaces. The train can bring people together. It can also divide. And then there's the emotional side. You stand on a platform, waving goodbye. A son heads to war. A wife leaves for work in the city. A brother emigrates, never to return. Trains carry more than cargo. They carry goodbyes, final hugs, hopeful glances, tears in coal-scented wind. Progress has a soundtrack, and it sounds like a departing whistle. As the section winds down, you find yourself aboard a sleeper train crossing the Scottish Highlands. The moonlight silvers the hills. The carriage rocks in a soft rhythm. Steam coils past your window like a ghost in motion. The industrial world races on. But for now, here in the quiet car, wrapped in scratchy wool blankets, and the fading scent of coal and cold tea, you let it lull you. The train will get there. You close your eyes. The morning fog is thick, swirling like pipe smoke over crooked chimneys and cobbled alleys. You wake not in a warm bed, but in a cramped urban tenement. Your nose filled with soot, your skin damp from the condensation gathering on the walls. Welcome to the city. No, not just any city. This is the new urban jungle, birthed from iron, coal, and desperation. And you're just trying to find a place to breathe. Let's get something clear. Urbanization during the Industrial Revolution is not a graceful process. Cities like Manchester, Birmingham, and Glasgow expand faster than anyone can plan or pave. One moment, it's a sleepy market town. The next, it's a roaring inferno of factories, chimneys, and clanging hammers. Manchester earns the nickname Cottonopolis, but it could just as well be called Smokestack City. The air here is thick enough to chew. You squint up, trying to spot the sky through the grime, but it's long since been swallowed by smoke. You move here looking for opportunity, like everyone else. You come from the countryside, where jobs have dried up and machines have replaced your family's spinning wheel. You pack a single bag. Maybe you hitch a ride on a wagon. Maybe you walk. What you find isn't quite the golden promise the newspapers suggested. You find overcrowded tenements, 6 families to a floor, no toilets, just one outhouse shared by 50. Water comes from a street pump, often placed just a few unfortunate steps from the cesspit. You wash with a bucket, cook over coal, and pray you don't catch cholera, which sweeps through the slums like clockwork every few years. Oh, and you're on the top floor with no elevator, and you work a 14-hour shift. Welcome to leg day. By the 1850s, more than half of Britain's population lives in cities. That's new. That's seismic. The great country idyll, the romantic rural England of Jane Austen and sheep-strewn meadows, is now mostly a myth for the working class. People follow the money, and the money is in factories, but cities weren't ready. Streets aren't wide enough. Sewers don't exist. There's no trash collection. Rats are not visitors. They're tenants. Urban planning is a joke. And the punchline is always dysentery. There's one case in 1858 where the smell of the Thames gets so vile, Parliament literally can't function. They call it the Great Stink. Quirky fact unlocked. MPs flee the chamber, clutching scented cloths to their faces like panicked geishas. Within weeks, the government passes massive sanitation reforms, because nothing motivates action like the smell of raw sewage baking in summer heat. You can't talk about cities without talking about class. The rich live on hills, far from the smoke. They have air, gardens, and hot meals. You're sharing a damp mattress with 3 siblings and a cat that may or may not be alive. Every morning you squeeze past piles of coal, broken glass, and chimney sweeps who look about 10 years old. Social reformers start taking notes. Writers like Charles Dickens become household names, not just because they write gripping stories, but because they expose the grit and grief of industrial life. Oliver Twist isn't fiction, it's a field report, and yet, somehow, people adapt. Children play cricket in alleys. Women sell hot pies from push carts. A man in the square plays a hurdy-gurdy with 2 teeth and a twinkle in his eye. The human spirit, absurd and stubborn, finds a way to giggle through the smoke. Let's go shopping. The markets are madness. Open-air stalls, pigs squealing in crates, butchers yelling, chimney boys darting under carts with the finesse of rats in waistcoats. You duck into a pawn shop where every item smells faintly of regret. Outside, a man tries to sell you a clock with no hands and a hat full of holes. But down the street, on the other side of the tracks, there's a different world. There's a department store. Yes, they're a new invention. Marble floors, gaslighting, elevators operated by uniformed boys. You walk in, and it's like stepping into a palace, made entirely of corsets, pocket watches, and velvet. Suddenly, shopping isn't just necessity, it's recreation. Middle-class families stroll past counters of lace, sugar, and the latest in whalebone fashion. If your accent's right, and your boots don't squeak too much, maybe you'll pass for one of them for a minute. But let's be real, you're working class, so your leisure looks different. You might visit a music hall, packed shoulder to shoulder, the air soaked in beer and laughter. The songs are bawdy, the jokes are cheap, and everyone knows the chorus. Or maybe you head to a public house, where the ale is warm and the floors sticky. but the company is loud and familiar. And then there's football. Yes, football becomes a serious pastime during the industrial age. Factory teams form leagues. Local pride hinges on who can punt a pigskin the best. It's tribal, it's passionate, and it's a break from the drudgery of work. Now let's talk about crime. With cities come criminals, both the desperate and the professional. The pickpocket who eyes your pocket watch. The chimney sweep who lifts rings from mantelpieces. The gang of orphans with a knife and a plan. Policing still figuring itself out. The London Metropolitan Police, only just formed in 1829. Before that, crime prevention is mostly hope for the best, mixed with run faster than the guy behind you. Punishments are brutal. Petty theft might land you in Newgate Prison, or worse, on a ship bound for Australia. Because yes, the British Empire solves overcrowding by sending you halfway across the globe with a one-way ticket and a new profession as reluctant colonist. Historians still debate whether these deportations were clever penal policy or just Britain outsourcing its misfits. You want to escape the city? So do thousands. That's how suburbs begin. Tiny patches of green where the smoke hasn't quite settled. The trains help, of course. The middle class begins the great exodus, boarding daily trains from leafy edges to the hellish core of the city. Then back again. The rich go farther still. Some build country retreats, equipped with modern plumbing and walls high enough to forget what's happening outside. You remain because you need the job, and the job is here. So you endure, you wake early, queue for bread, dodge carts, squeeze into your factory shift, and pray the steam boiler doesn't burst. You hear newsboys yelling headlines: War in Crimea, New Queen portrait, released, fire destroys, textile mill. You're always balancing on the edge of survival, of hope, of collapse. And still, somehow, you live. You climb to your tenement's rooftop one evening, just for air. Chimneys stretch into the dusk like blackened fingers. Somewhere, a train whistles. A baby cries below. The gas lamps flicker on, dim halos in the murk, and you just sit there, letting the cold wind kiss your cheeks, watching the city heave and sigh like a sleeping beast. This is the new world. Ugly, beautiful, brutal, alive. And it's only just beginning. You're back on the floor again. This time, a factory floor. The clatter of metal is deafening. You can't hear yourself think. Somewhere behind you, a steam piston hisses like a furious cat. Someone yells, but it's lost in the grind of gears and belts. You duck just in time to avoid losing a few new inches off your forehead to a rotating shaft. Welcome to the industrial workplace. No HR, no brakes, no earplugs, no kidding. By the mid-1800s, the factory has become the symbol and engine of the Industrial Revolution. Whether it's cotton spinning in Manchester, iron foundries in Birmingham, or shipbuilding in Glasgow, the factory is more than a place of work. It's a machine itself, And you? You're just a cog. Factories aren't just buildings. They're beasts, loud, hot, and constantly hungry for labor. You enter one, and time stops being yours. It becomes measured in whistles. Start, break, end. You don't own your minutes anymore. Mr. Clock does. Work starts at 6 a.m. or earlier. You're up before sunrise, stomach growling. If you're lucky, you get a mug of weak tea and a heel of bread. If not, well, hope someone drops a crumb at lunch. Once inside, you don't stop moving. You tie threads, pour molten metal, hammer rivets, or tend the steam engines that could kill you in an instant if you glance away. You learn fast, or you get hurt faster. In a textile mill, your world is a blur of white cotton and red danger. Threads snag, twist, whip at your hands. The machines are relentless. One wrong move and, well, you learn why so many workers have missing fingers. Or worse, quirky fact time. To clean the fluff under machines while they were running, they used scavenger boys. That's right. Actual children would crawl under live machinery, just inches from being mangled, while the looms thundered overhead. Sometimes they didn't crawl back out. This is not a bedtime story for kids. This is the bedtime story for kids. Your coworker is 10. His name's Tommy. He's been working since he was 5. Small hands, perfect for threading bobbins. He hasn't been to school. He doesn't know what a holiday is. But he knows how to fix a jammed spinning frame faster than most adults. And he knows to hide when the overseer is drunk. Across the floor, there's Mary. She works 16-hour days in a match factory. White phosphorus dust turns her fingers brittle and her breath sour. Eventually, it may rot her jaw from the inside out. It's called phossy jaw, and it glows in the dark like a candle from hell. Historians still argue whether conditions like these were necessary evils of progress or just greed in overdrive. You get a 10-minute break, maybe. You sit on an overturned crate, sucking coal dust air, while someone hands out lukewarm gruel. A fight breaks out nearby. Tensions are high. One man got docked pay for being 2 minutes late. Another lost his job for sneezing too close to the foreman. Wages are brutal. You might earn £1 a week if you're a man. Less if you're a woman. Even less if you're a child. It's just enough to keep you fed, barely clothed, and sleeping 6 to a room. And there's no security. If you lose a limb, you lose your job. No compensation, no apology. Just a replacement waiting outside with fresh legs. Now let's peek at management. The factory owner? He lives on a hill, probably. His boots shine. His mustache is waxed. He gives speeches about moral industry and duty to God and progress. He's never touched a loom in his life. But some owners are better than others. Enter Robert Owen, a cotton mill magnate with a soul. He cuts working hours, builds schools for children, and tries to prove you don't have to treat workers like replaceable parts. Of course, he's the exception, not the rule. But he does plant the seeds of labor reform and gives hope that change might come. Which brings us to the rise of something new: unions. You join one, quietly, secretly. They're not always legal yet. Sometimes, just talking about organizing can get you blacklisted. But the whispers are growing louder. The phrase collective bargaining begins to float around smoky pubs. People start demanding safer conditions, reasonable hours, and you'll love this, weekends. Yes, the sacred modern weekend doesn't exist yet. Your Sunday is for church. Your Saturday, that's just another work day. But the labor movement wants to change that. There are strikes, marches, factory owners panic, governments send in police. Sometimes it gets ugly. Still, the idea catches on. Workers have power if they stand together. New inventions keep speeding things up. The Bessemer process makes steel cheaper and faster. The telegraph brings instant communication. Even time becomes standardized because railroads and factories need everyone on the same minute. Time zones are invented. Imagine that. People start caring about what o'clock it is somewhere else. You're officially part of a world that's ticking in sync, and you can't stop the clock. One day, someone whispers about a new kind of job. Less smoke, more light, fewer limbs lost. It's in an office. An office. You've never even been in one. But someone says they need a clerk. If you can read, write, and sit up straight, you might get in. You start practicing your penmanship with a stub of charcoal on the back of a paper sack. You eavesdrop on teachers. You memorize letters from biscuit tins. You dream. The factory still claims most of your days. But the world is changing outside. There's talk of compulsory education. That means even Tommy might go to school one day. Inspectors are showing up to mills with clipboards and scowls. Factory acts start passing in Parliament. No kids under 9. Shorter hours for teens. Mandatory mealtime. It's not perfect, but it's a start. Late at night, long after your shift, you sit by the fire. If you're lucky enough to have one, your fingers are stained. Your back aches. You count the coins in your pocket. Outside, factories still roar. The city is never truly quiet. But above it all, you hear something new. Hope, not loud, not booming, but steady, like a heartbeat. You survived another day. And maybe, just maybe, you're building a world where your children won't have to crawl under machines to earn a crust. It's the year 1851. And you are absolutely dazzled. You squint upward through a misty London morning, jaw slack, gawping at a thing that looks like someone built a greenhouse out of dreams. It stretches across Hyde Park, like a glass and iron cathedral. They call it the Crystal Palace. And it's not just a building. It's a statement, a shimmering, modern miracle. Announcing, look what we've done and what we can do next. Welcome to the Great Exhibition. Inside, the air smells like sawdust steam, and very expensive soap. Your boots echo against iron floors, polished by thousands of feet, and the glass ceiling above lets in gentle gray light from the sky. It's 990,000 square feet of global invention crammed into one transparent shell. And everyone from chimney sweeps to Queen Victoria herself is here to see it. You're practically elbowing your way past dukes and duchesses and German philosophers with pointy beards. A kid in a sailor suit nearly trips you. Somewhere, someone is playing the harmonium. You press forward through the crowd, and then, boom, there it is, the steam-powered printing press, hissing gently, all brass fittings and whirring wheels, 100 newspapers an hour. You stare, mouth dry. This thing is churning out knowledge like a pastry shop cranks out croissants. And that's just one corner. The Great Exhibition has 13,000 exhibits from over 40 countries. There are Indian silks, Canadian maple logs, Russian furs, German telescopes, Chinese porcelain, American guns, Swiss watches, French perfumes, Egyptian furniture, and a loom from Leeds that could probably knit you a sweater in under 5 minutes. They call it the first World's Fair. And it's not just a party. It's a mirror, a marketplace, and a flex. You pass through the British section, which is, well, a bit smug. Giant steam engines, coal samples from Newcastle, lace so fine it looks like spider webs. And at the center, a machinery court filled with the sound of pistons, belts, and rotating marvels that hum like futuristic beasts. You can't help it. You reach out and touch the smooth iron side of one machine. Feel the pulse of movement through metal. It's hypnotic, a mechanical ballet. The guy next to you murmurs something about man's triumph over nature. But is it? Historians still argue whether the Great Exhibition celebrated human ingenuity or just plastered over imperial greed with polished brass. Because here's the twist. This isn't just a tech show. It's empire on parade. The British Empire is flexing hard. Look, they say, we've brought the riches of the world right to your doorstep. Colonies have entire sections. India's exhibit alone is a kaleidoscope of gemstones, carved ivory, and sandalwood fans. There's even a full elephant howdah. The empire is presented like a glittering buffet. Take what you want. No questions asked. But you have questions. Who made these silk carpets? Who mined that gold? Who grew the sugar in that refined cake display under the Union Jack? You look closer, and the answer often is people who didn't volunteer. Still, the public is enchanted. Over 6 million visitors pass through these halls in 6 months. Queen Victoria comes often. Charles Darwin drops by. Even Karl Marx comes, though he finds the whole thing a bit much and calls it a fantastic facade of bourgeois nonsense. Classic Karl. A quirky detail. In one of the displays, a pair of false teeth made entirely from hippopotamus ivory, polished to a shine. Supposedly hygienic, terrifyingly expensive. Someone murmurs, fit for a queen. And you can't tell if they're being literal or sarcastic. A few stalls away, there's a self-adjusting corset, a mechanical leech, and a man selling a steam-powered coffee roaster that smells like it's about to explode. No health and safety laws here, just mustaches and ambition. And over in the American section, a little-known invention called the telegraph. Click, click, click. Messages zipping over wires at the speed of thought. Samuel Morse's name is on everyone's lips. You realize, with a tingle, information just got wings. There's something else in the air. Not just coal dust and cologne. It's globalization, a new word. Not yet used, but now alive. You're watching it unfold. The world is smaller. Cultures, materials, and people are being zipped together by ships, railways, and telegrams. The silk you see today might be sewn into a waistcoat in London tomorrow. Tea leaves from Ceylon pass through Liverpool before ending up in someone's dainty porcelain cup in Paris. It's exhilarating and deeply uneven, because for every exhibition goer marveling at an African spear or a Persian carpet, there's someone back home living under a colonial flag, working in harsh conditions, often for the benefit of strangers oceans away. You brush your fingers over a globe in the geography section. It's massive. The British Empire alone covers a quarter of it. Red splotches everywhere. The sun famously never sets on it, and you suspect it's because the workers never sleep. As you near the end of the exhibition, you find the Koh-i-Noor diamond displayed in a glass case like a sacred relic. It's stunning, cold, and perfect. 105 carats of pure historical tension, originally from India, acquired, depending on who's telling the story, either as a diplomatic gift or via less than friendly colonial methods. Today, it's here, under British glass. People queue to see it. Some whisper that it's cursed. You stare at it and wonder, can beauty hide conquest? Can brilliance blind? You step back. The Crystal Palace is dismantled after the exhibition ends, moved to South London, and eventually destroyed by fire in 1936. But its legacy? That never burns. It sets the template for international exhibitions, world's fairs, and even modern expos. It shapes Victorian aesthetics, global trade policies, and technological ambition for decades to come. More importantly, it marks a pivot. From this point forward, you no longer live in a world of isolated nations and local economies. The gears of one continent turn the lives of another. Machines speak across oceans. The game is global now. And you're no longer just a weaver, or a miner, or a city dweller. You're a participant in a connected civilization, hurtling forward with no brakes, and an engine that's getting louder. The lights of the Crystal Palace dim behind your eyes. You walk out into the London fog, breath visible, hands in your coat pockets. Somewhere across the ocean, a telegraph clicks. The world is calling. By now, your boots are worn thin. Coal dust cakes the cuffs of your trousers. The world feels both enormous and dangerously small. And tonight, your journey shifts east you step off a British steamship and onto the docks of Yokohama, Japan, in the early 1870s. And the air hits you like a fan snapped open. The scent is all cedar and seawater. Kites wheel above the rooftops, and temple bells hum quietly in the distance. But the real sound beneath it all, the one you're tuned into, is the clank of modernity arriving fast. Because you've just entered Meiji-era Japan, and oh boy, things are about to accelerate like a bullet train. Except they haven't invented that yet. You blink at the skyline, half-tiled roofs and pagodas, half-telegraph wires and smokestacks. It's a world cracking open from the inside, trying to stay ancient while racing toward modern. And everyone's a little dizzy about it. For centuries, Japan has been in near total isolation under the Tokugawa shogunate. Foreigners? Nope. Christianity? Illegal. Trade? Only with the Dutch. And only through a tiny man-made island in Nagasaki Harbor. But then, bang. In 1853, Commodore Matthew Perry shows up with 4 American steamships, puffing black smoke and carrying cannons that say, "Nice country you have here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it." The Japanese called them the Kurofune, the black ships. Not exactly subtle, and just like that, the walls come down. By 1868, the emperor is restored to power, the shogunate is dissolved, and the Meiji Restoration is in full swing. Restoration, by the way, is a lovely euphemism. It's more like a controlled detonation of the old world. Samurai are told to lose their swords. Everyone's wearing trousers. Rice farmers now pay taxes in cash. And suddenly, there's a national railway, a Western-style constitution, universal education, and the Japanese Navy starts dressing like the British Royal Navy, but with cooler mustaches. Historians still argue whether this sudden pivot was forced, or if it was a long overdue correction. Some say Japan feared becoming the next India. Others say they were just waiting for the right moment to modernize on their own terms. Either way, you're watching a miracle of controlled chaos. Imagine trying to download 2 centuries of the Industrial Revolution into a culture that still mostly lights homes with oil lamps and wears silk robes. That's Japan in the Meiji era, and they're pulling it off. You find yourself in a Tokyo factory district, newly renamed from its old Edo identity, and it's all noise and ambition. The smokestacks puff like they've been there forever, but many are only months old. Steam engines, reassembled from European blueprints, drive looms that weave silk at unholy speeds. You spot a Yatabe loom, a Japanese-designed hybrid that looks like it wants to be British, but keeps its bolts and wood grain uniquely local. There's a young girl, maybe 12, feeding threads into it with a rhythm so fast it makes your head spin. And you suddenly realize this industrial revolution has distinctly Japanese fingerprints. Rather than importing foreign workers, Japan sends its students abroad, bright young minds sailing to Germany, Britain, and America to study science, military tactics, railroads, and engineering. They return with degrees, ideas, and tea cravings for Earl Grey. They call them the Iwakura Mission, one of the most ambitious, diplomatic, and educational world tours in history. Imagine if your entire high school went on a 3-year field trip to learn how to modernize an empire, except with more waistcoats. But here's the trick. Japan doesn't just copy the West, it reinvents. The Meiji government builds its textile mills to compete directly with British India. It encourages zaibatsu, massive industrial conglomerates like Mitsubishi and Sumitomo, to grow with both state support and aggressive business strategy. By the 1890s, Japan is exporting more silk than any other country. Meanwhile, young men are called to military service, trained with Prussian precision. A new navy rises, equipped with steel ships, and officers educated in British academies. And, surprise, this whole modernization thing, it comes with a sharp edge. In 1894, Japan wages war against China for dominance in Korea. Then again, in 1904, against Russia. Yeah, Japan versus Russia. Spoiler, Japan wins. In a shock to the Western world, a non-European industrial nation beats a major imperial power. It's like someone beat Mike Tyson in a boxing match, using a judo throw. The world's jaw collectively hits the floor. But don't get too starry-eyed. The transformation comes at a cost. Land taxes ruin poor farmers. Peasants move to cities in droves, cramming into factory jobs with grueling hours. Women, especially young girls, make up the majority of textile workers. Many sleep in dorms near the factory floor, fingers blistered, backs hunched before adulthood. One fringe detail: some mill owners used music, live flute or shamisen performances to keep girls working late into the night. Industrial lullabies with sharp edges. There's resistance too. Rural rebellions break out. The Satsuma Rebellion, led by a samurai named Saigo Takamori, allegedly the inspiration for The Last Samurai, is crushed in 1877. The age of warriors is over. Now it's the age of bureaucrats, businessmen, and budgets. And somewhere, a factory bell rings. You step into a Japanese classroom, a new one, styled after a German gymnasium. Children sit in rows on tatami mats, learning arithmetic, geography, even Western philosophy. The teacher wears a tailored coat over his hakama. He points to a chalkboard drawing of a steam engine, then recites Confucius. It's surreal, and it's working. The Meiji era proves something profound. Industrialization doesn't have to look like Manchester. It can wear a kimono, bow politely, and still build railways. And in doing so, Japan challenges the West's monopoly on modernity. By the time you leave, your mind is spinning. You've watched a society pivot so fast, it left its old clothes fluttering behind it. From samurai swords to steel ships in just a few decades. And Japan won't be the last. Other nations are taking notes. Korea watches nervously. China begins to debate its own reforms. Siam, modern Thailand, starts playing diplomacy like 4D chess to avoid colonization. The Industrial Revolution is no longer Western property. It's a contagious idea. As your ship pulls out of Yokohama Bay, you look back one last time. The mountains are still there, ancient and unmoved. Cherry blossoms bloom somewhere in the hills, but the factories are humming, the telegrams are clicking, and the children reciting geometry proofs in wooden classrooms are preparing to reshape the East. And you realize something. The future isn't just being built. It's being translated, reimagined, and exported. The Industrial Revolution has crossed the sea, and the world, it's starting to spin faster than ever before. The sky above you is vast and cracked with heat. Dust hangs in the air like a dry sigh. This time, you're in India, sometime between the late 1800s and early 1900s, a place older than empires, and yet caught body and soul in a very modern storm. The railway station is your first clue. There's a British official standing stiffly on the platform, mustache waxed to within an inch of absurdity. He's checking his pocket watch, like time itself answers to him. A barefoot boy sells chai in tiny clay cups. Somewhere in the distance, a sitar hums softly, totally unfazed by steel. And then, the train roars in. Black smoke curling like a question mark across the saffron sky. You've arrived at the beating heart of colonial modernization. Or, if you like a stronger brew, industrialization under occupation. Let's start here. India didn't choose the Industrial Revolution. It had it done to it. By the mid-1800s, India is a fully subjugated British colony. The East India Company, think of it as the nastiest startup in history, has collapsed after a series of violent revolts, most notably the Indian Rebellion of 1857, also called the Sepoy Mutiny. It's a brutal, bloody affair. British retaliation is savage, and the Crown takes over direct rule. From here on out, it's the British Raj, and with it comes a flood of steam engines, telegraph poles, and textile policies that will reshape the subcontinent. Let's talk textiles for a second. Before Britain got involved, India was the textile capital of the world. Bengal's hand-woven muslin was so fine, it was called woven air. Indian dyers used natural indigo and techniques passed down for generations. But it doesn't jive with British mills trying to dominate global cloth production. So the solution? Destroy the local industry. Raw cotton is now shipped to Lancashire to be processed by machines. Then the finished goods, coarse, cheaper, mass-produced, are sold back to India. Indian weavers can't compete. Some British officials even imposed taxes on local cloth making and cut the thumbs off of rebellious weavers. Historians still argue whether the thumb-chopping thing is exaggerated. But either way, the intent is clear. Crush the competition. It's industrial colonialism with extra starch. Meanwhile, Britain starts laying down railroads like veins. By 1900, India has more than 25,000 miles of track. It's one of the largest railway networks in the world. Now, you might be tempted to say, hey, at least they got trains. Sure, but here's the thing. The railroads are built by Indians for British use. They're designed to move troops quickly, to export goods efficiently, to move raw materials, cotton, jute, tea, opium, from the interior to ports like Bombay and Calcutta. These trains aren't for joyrides or domestic development. They're for economic extraction. You sit inside a second-class car. Third class is open air and packed like sardines. And you feel the wheels clatter over hot iron tracks. Outside your window, oxen still plow fields the same way they did 2,000 years ago. Industrialization has arrived, but only in select corridors. It's a two-speed reality. But India isn't just lying back. All over the country, people are responding, sometimes in subtle ways, sometimes with outright rebellion, and sometimes by picking up the tools of modernity and turning them inward. Let's meet a guy, Jamsetji Tata. He's a Parsi industrialist who's basically the father of Indian steel. In 1907, he founds the Tata Iron and Steel Company, what you now know as Tata Steel. His dream? An India that manufactures its own goods, controls its own resources, and stands industrially independent. He builds his plant in a tiny jungle village called Sakchi, later renamed Jamshedpur. British officials scoffed at him. They said India couldn't handle heavy industry. Tata proved them wrong. Meanwhile, Indian thinkers and reformers are absorbing Western education and twisting it into tools of resistance. There's Dadabhai Naoroji, who formulates the drain theory, the idea that Britain is sucking the wealth out of India without giving anything back. Spoiler, he's right. You have Bal Gangadhar Tilak, who mixes Hindu religious pride with political activism. And then, like a quiet storm, comes Mahatma Gandhi. Still young at this point, Gandhi doesn't begin his major campaigns until the 1910s and 1920s, but already the mood is shifting. The idea that India could modernize on its own terms, without British tutelage, is gaining strength. The Industrial Revolution hasn't just arrived. It's become a battleground for identity. Let's switch gears and zoom into a mill. You're in Bombay. It's early morning, and a whistle shrieks above the tiled rooftops. Men and women shuffle into long, narrow buildings. Textile mills powered by steam, built with British investment, but run largely by Indian workers. It's loud, stuffy. The air tastes like oil and sweat and cotton dust. Women work the spindles. Children sweep the floors under the clattering looms. Labor is cheap, and regulations are few. One odd detail. To avoid the cost of electricity, some mills are run on imported whale oil as lubricant well into the 1900s. That's right, deep in central India, the machinery runs on blubber. You don't make eye contact with the overseers, not because they're cruel, although some are, but because no one does. It's a system, a flow, a grinding machine that eats hours and coughs out coins. And yet, in the shadows, labor movements begin to stir. By 1918, India sees its first organized textile strike. Workers are demanding better pay, shorter hours, actual lunch breaks. The British frown. Indian business elites shift uncomfortably. But something has shifted. People now understand the power of numbers and of industry. This will be important later, especially during the Quit India movement and post-independence economic planning. Because yes, eventually, India will throw off the colonial yoke. But that's still decades away. Right now, in the crucible of imperial industry, a new kind of Indian identity is being forged. One that doesn't just endure the Industrial Revolution, it adapts it. Before you leave, you walk along a railway bridge outside Calcutta. Beneath you, the Hooghly River shimmers like tarnished silver. A goods train passes by, coal from Jharkhand, bound for ships headed to Liverpool. And somewhere beside the tracks, a woman boils lentils over a fire, her sari fluttering in the wind. This is the paradox of Indian industrialization. Raw speed colliding with ancient rhythm. Giant machines casting long shadows over village wells. British policies dictating futures, even as Indians quietly rewrite them. And yet, in the eyes of a barefoot girl watching that train vanish down the tracks, you catch a flicker of something unspoken. A sense that someday soon, the hands that built the machines will run them too. It smells like old diesel and tropical rain. Welcome to Cairo, sometime in the early 20th century, when the pyramids are still crumbling in the sun, but the people below them are staring at telegraph wires, French locomotives, and cotton gins. You're not on a camel, please. This isn't a postcard. You're riding a British-owned tram, zipping past sandstone villas and palm trees that sway like they know secrets. Somewhere behind you, a steam whistle blows, sharp and colonial. Egypt, the cradle of civilization, is being pulled, sometimes dragged, into the modern industrial era. But here's the twist. It's not because Egypt wants steam engines. It's because Europe wants cotton. Let's unfurl the linen. Egypt was never fully colonized in the same way as India, but that doesn't mean it escaped foreign control. Not even close. By the 1860s, Egypt is officially part of the Ottoman Empire. But really, it's doing its own thing under the rule of Khedive Ismail, a man with Versailles dreams and Manchester money problems. He wants to make Egypt part of Europe, which in practice means borrowing massive sums to build opera houses, canals, boulevards, and industrial infrastructure. The crown jewel, the Suez Canal, completed in 1869. Now, ships can skip the whole trip around Africa and cut straight through to Asia. It's like building a time portal for commerce. You, of course, are standing on the canal's edge, sand crunching underfoot, watching a French steamer pass like a floating chateau. But here's the kicker. Egypt didn't build that canal for itself. French and British investors funded it. Egyptian peasants, called fellahin, dug the trench, often in brutal conditions, sometimes forced by corvée labor, state-imposed unpaid work. Tens of thousands died. And who controls the toll money? Not Egypt. To pay for these dreams, Ismail racks up catastrophic debt. By 1876, Egypt defaults. It's the Victorian version of bankruptcy. And the British Empire doesn't take kindly to unpaid bills. So in 1882, Britain invades. They say it's temporary, just to restore order. But spoiler alert, they stay for 72 years. From this point forward, Egypt becomes a veiled protectorate. Not a colony on paper, but fully controlled when it matters. Especially when it comes to money, agriculture, and infrastructure. Let's talk about that infrastructure, because it's modernizing fast. The British expand railroads, telegraphs, and postal systems. They improve irrigation canals and modernize the port of Alexandria. But just like in India, this modernization serves imperial needs first. Take the railroads. They aren't laid down to connect Cairo to Luxor for your aunt's vacation. They're there to move cotton to the port. Cotton, the white gold of empire. During the American Civil War, 1861 to 65, the Union blockades southern cotton exports. British mills panic. Where will their fluff come from? Answer: Egypt. The country becomes a boomtown for cotton. Prices surge. Plantations explode in number. And suddenly, you're standing on a newly irrigated plain in the Nile Delta, surrounded by monoculture fields and sweating workers. But when the Civil War ends, demand drops, prices crash, and Egypt is left with a one-crop economy and mountains of debt. Factories start popping up, especially near Cairo and Alexandria. Sugar refineries, matchstick plants, cigarette factories, steam-powered, imported machinery whirs like a foreign heartbeat. But here's the rub. Most of the profits don't stay in Egypt. Foreign companies, mostly British, French, and Greek, own or finance the plants. Egyptians provide the labor, but rarely the management or capital. There's even a term for this two-tiered world: the foreign quarters, areas with electricity, paved streets, ice, and tennis clubs. Meanwhile, the rest of the population lives with open sewers, kerosene lamps, and rotting tenements. It's like living beside the future, but not in it. Still, Egyptians begin to respond. Education expands, literacy rises, and with it, political consciousness. In 1919, after World War I, Egyptians launch a massive revolution, demanding independence. They're tired of being modernized, but not free. Women march, students strike, railway workers sabotage imperial shipments. It's Egypt's first real nationalist movement. Britain grants Egypt partial independence in 1922, but keeps control of the Suez Canal and key military areas. Historians still argue whether this was a sincere gesture or a clever stall tactic. Either way, Egyptians know the real independence will have to be won. By the 1930s and 40s, industrialization speeds up. Egyptian entrepreneurs start their own businesses. Government-owned factories open, and a generation of engineers, machinists, and intellectuals rises, determined to reshape the country. But the old structures are hard to shake. Let's take a quirky example. Toilet paper production. Yep, you're standing in a Cairo factory in 1940. The machine was shipped in from Belgium. It's enormous, slightly rusted, and has a name painted on it in French. It's powered by a diesel engine that needs hand cranking. The labels are in 3 languages: Arabic, English, and Italian. And the rolls? They're too wide for the local dispensers. This is what industrial adaptation looks like. A little clumsy, a lot determined. Then comes Gamal Abdel Nasser. By 1952, after a military coup, the monarchy is overthrown. Nasser rises with promises of land reform, modernization, and, yes, industrial power. He nationalizes the Suez Canal in 1956, triggering a crisis where Britain, France, and Israel invade. But the world sides with Egypt. The invaders back down. It's a symbolic turning point. Suddenly, Egypt is calling its own shots. Steel plants rise. Textile mills hum. And a new chapter begins. One shaped not by foreign engineers, but by Egyptian ambition. Before you leave, you walk once more along the Nile. There's a boy swimming near a concrete dam. A radio buzzes with Arabic pop music. In the distance, a sugar refinery exhales white smoke into the sky. The pyramids still sit, watching all of it like indifferent time travelers. They've seen empires rise and fall. But this industrial moment is different. It's messy, political, tangled in wires and trade, and still deeply Egyptian. You're blinking under the hazy sun of Buenos Aires, your boots crunching gravel by a row of idle freight trains. The air smells of beef fat, coal smoke, and fresh-cut hay. Somewhere, a tango wafts from a nearby cafe. It's Argentina in the early 20th century, and the Industrial Revolution has rolled in. Not with the chaos of steam belching from Dickensian factories, but with the smooth hum of British-financed elegance and the scent of export wealth. But don't let the golden light fool you. This is no local miracle. Argentina's transformation is as global as it gets, shaped by railways, cattle, and a relentless craving for grain and meat in the heart of Europe. Let's ride the rails. First, it's important to set the scene. Argentina is not a colonial possession in the 19th century, not like India or Egypt, but its economy might as well be leased to Europe, especially Britain. From the 1860s to the early 1900s, the Argentine government throws its arms wide open to foreign capital. And capital comes pouring in like red wine at a Sunday asado. Argentina doesn't industrialize with smoke-choked tenements and soot-covered children. It industrializes by becoming the butcher of Europe. The country boasts a vast pampas, endless grasslands stretching for days. And on this green ocean graze millions of cattle and sheep, tended by stoic gauchos on horseback. No fences, no factories, just meat waiting to be monetized. Enter refrigeration. You stand beside a refrigerated meat packing plant in La Boca, circa 1895. You hear the clang of hooks, the hiss of ammonia coolants, and the murmur of workers in Spanish, Italian, and German. Before refrigeration, cattle were slaughtered and salted for jerky. But with the advent of cold storage, Argentina revolutionizes global meat trade. Steamships now arrive fitted with refrigerated chambers. Sides of beef are loaded on with cranes, packed tight, and shipped across the Atlantic to Liverpool, Marseille, and Hamburg. For the first time, Europe can enjoy fresh Argentine steaks, grilled in Paris bistros, served on fine china in London. Meanwhile, back in Argentina, this boom fuels massive infrastructure growth. Let's talk railroads. And I mean a lot of railroads. From the 1870s onward, British companies build over 30,000 kilometers of track across the country, one of the largest rail networks in the world at the time. The design is simple. All lines lead to Buenos Aires, the grand export funnel. Grain from Rosario, beef from Cordoba, hides from the interior. You can trace the path of empire by train timetables. Historians still argue whether this network was a gift or a shackle. On one hand, it modernized Argentina fast. On the other, it tied the economy completely to export demands. Think monoculture, but with grain and beef instead of sugar or cotton. And then there's the finance. British banks hold Argentine debt. British companies operate utilities, railroads, and shipping. British immigrants even build Anglican churches in the Pampas, where you half expect a chimney sweep to ride in on horseback. You walk into a Buenos Aires post office in 1902. It's marble floored, chandelier lit, and wired for international telegrams. But the desk clerk greets you in English. It's an odd empire, indirect, but deeply embedded. What about factories? They're here, but they're late to the game. For decades, Argentina imports nearly everything. Locomotives from Birmingham, cotton fabric from Manchester, canned goods from Europe. Even the rail ties under your feet, shipped across the ocean, nailed into the pampas by imported labor. By the 1920s, this imbalance becomes a problem. The country has a growing middle class. Doctors, lawyers, engineers. And they want more than meat and wheat. They want independence in every sense of the word. So, the Argentine government begins pushing for domestic industry. They raise tariffs, fund national factories, and support import substitution, building what they used to buy. A quirky example, matchstick factories. You're walking through one in 1935. It's hot and loud. The air smells like sulfur and glue. Tiny paper boxes labeled La Estrella tumble down a belt. The workers are mostly Italian women, hairpinned, heads down. Why matches? Because even the smallest imports become symbolic. If you can't light your own cigarette with a homegrown flame, are you really independent? In the meantime, Buenos Aires becomes known as the Paris of South America. The streets are wide. The architecture is Beaux-Arts meets Tango Baroque. Subways are built. Theaters bloom. Electric trams glide through downtown. But not everyone is invited to the dance. Industrial wealth is unevenly spread. The working class, often recent immigrants from Europe, live in crowded conventillos, tenement houses that smell of coffee, sweat, and damp laundry. Labor unions form. Strikes erupt. You pass a row of posters in 1919 demanding pan y trabajo, bread and work. A police wagon creaks by, loaded with arrested protesters. That year, during the Semana Trágica, Tragic Week, the military cracks down on striking workers in Buenos Aires. Hundreds are killed. Blood stains the cobbled streets not far from the Opera House. Industrialization brings progress, but also pressure, discontent, and eventually revolution. The 1930s hit hard. Global depression slashes demand for Argentine exports. British ties strain. The peso wobbles, and a new political wind starts to blow. In 1946, Juan Perón is elected president, a former colonel with a talent for speeches and an obsession with self-reliance. Perón transforms the state into Argentina, Inc. Under Perón, the government nationalizes railroads, shipping, utilities, and major industries. Foreign-owned companies are booted or bought out. Import substitution becomes doctrine. State-owned factories spring up everywhere. Textiles, tires, steel. You walk into a Peronist textile mill in 1951. The machines roar. A portrait of Perón and his glamorous wife, Evita, hangs above the time clock. Workers wear government-issued uniforms. There's music on the loudspeaker and pamphlets by the water cooler titled Industrialize or Die. Perón calls this justicialismo, a mix of social justice, economic nationalism, and authoritarian charisma. It's like FDR's New Deal, married Mussolini's aesthetics, and moved to the southern hemisphere. The country industrializes rapidly. Consumer goods boom. Radios, sewing machines, Argentine cars. The middle class expands, but critics warn. This model is fragile, heavily state-controlled, dependent on high tariffs, and prone to inflation. They're not wrong. By the late 1950s, the economy sours. Debt rises. Inflation hits. Perón is overthrown and later returns. Argentina is never short on drama. Still, Industrialization continues, more uneven now, sometimes chaotic, but undeniably Argentine. And amid all the politics and policy, the culture remains electric. There's a tango band rehearsing near a textile plant, a cafe where radical poets sip mate and debate syndicalism, a woman typing invoices at a meatpacking firm who secretly dreams of becoming a tango singer. This is industrialization on the periphery of empire. Not an echo of Manchester, but something else. Something spiced with yerba, bloodied by protest, draped in velvet. As night falls over Buenos Aires, you lean against a lamppost on Avenida 9 de Julio, one of the widest streets in the world. There are headlights, cigarette smoke, and the soft swish of a tramline. A man in a wool suit walks past reading La Prensa. A street vendor sells hot choripan sandwiches by the dozen. And overhead, lit like a movie set, the neon sign of a British insurance firm still flickers beside the Argentine flag. Industrial transformation in the southern cone. Elegant, turbulent, unfinished. You wake up to the sound of a distant gong. The air smells like coal dust, pine resin, and something strangely sweet, boiling silk cocoons. Outside your paper screen window, the old and the new are colliding in the most poetic way possible. A wooden pagoda silhouetted against a rising smokestack. Welcome to Japan, 1870s and onward. A land still haunted by samurai ghosts and incense smoke, now waking up with a full industrial yawn. And you're not dreaming. This really is the Meiji Restoration, and it's one of the most dramatic industrial turnarounds in human history. Let's rewind just a little. In 1853, U.S. Commodore Matthew Perry sails into Edo Bay with black ships and a not-so-polite letter from President Fillmore. Japan, which had closed itself off from most foreign contact for over 2 centuries, is forced open like a rusty door on ancient hinges. Cue political panic, a shogunate crisis, and eventually the fall of Japan's ruling military class. By 1868, the Tokugawa shogunate is gone, and a teenage emperor named Mutsuhito, later known as the Meiji Emperor, is sitting on the chrysanthemum throne. He's got a new motto: Fukoku Kyohei, rich country, strong army. He means business. Big, steam-powered business. Imagine an old wooden samurai estate being surveyed by engineers, holding Western-style blueprints. This is not a metaphor. It actually happened. The Meiji leadership understood one very real thing. If Japan didn't modernize fast, it would be colonized or carved up like China had been. So in record time, they imported teachers from France, shipwrights from Britain, military advisors from Prussia, and textile engineers from America. They weren't shy about borrowing. And unlike many places where industrialization came top-down via colonial rule, Japan's modernization was self-directed. It wasn't perfect, but it was urgent, organized, and wildly ambitious. You find yourself inside Japan's first government-built cotton spinning mill in 1877, the Tomioka Silk Mill. The air is heavy with heat and silkworm smell. Dozens of women sit at gleaming French-imported reeling machines, dressed in modified kimonos with factory aprons. They're not servants. They're national heroines, often recruited from samurai families as symbols of loyalty to the emperor. It's part of the new Japanese identity: hard work, group harmony, industrial patriotism, and women, crucial. In the early stages, women make up over 60% of the industrial workforce, especially in textiles, which became Japan's first global export powerhouse. Japanese silk and cotton began flooding Western markets, woven tighter than diplomatic treaties. But the real thunder came with steel and steam. Japan built railroads with British steel and German engineering. It founded its own Imperial Navy, modeled after the Royal Navy, but painted in crisp white with red suns. And it launched mining and metallurgy operations with jaw-dropping speed. One notable landmark, Yawata Steel Works, opened in 1901. You stand beside a massive blast furnace on Kyushu Island, watching molten iron pour like lava into molds. It's noisy, smoky, and surprisingly patriotic. The whole facility is managed by Japanese engineers trained overseas. Within a decade, Yawata becomes the largest steel mill in East Asia, and it fuels not just factories, but warships, railways, and ambitions. By the early 20th century, Japan was building its own infrastructure, manufacturing warships, and creating a fully integrated industrial economy. Now let's talk culture clash. You're on a Tokyo street corner in 1895. On one side, a Buddhist monk sells hand-copied sutras. On the other, a group of university students in stiff Western suits and bowler hats are quoting Herbert Spencer, yes, the social Darwinism guy, while eating curry rice, a British colonial import. Ironically, the Meiji period isn't just factories. It's a social transformation. The samurai class is abolished. Everyone must register a surname, which used to be mostly for the elite. A modern school system is introduced, based on European models. Western music, architecture, and even ballroom dancing are taught alongside Confucian ethics. But there's resistance too. Old warriors mourn the loss of sword rights. Shinto priests fume over Western attire. Some riots even break out when top knots are banned. Yes, that was a big deal. Still, Meiji Japan is all in on transformation. By 1905, it isn't just catching up, it's winning wars. Let's zoom in on the Russo-Japanese War. It's 1904. You're aboard a Japanese battleship, oil lamps swinging as officers pass messages in Morse code. Off the coast of Korea, the Japanese Navy engages and defeats the Russian fleet. A global shockwave. Why? Because this is the first time an Asian power decisively defeats a European one in a modern war. The implications are enormous. Japan's industrial success is no longer theory. It's proof that an Eastern nation could adopt Western technology and outplay the imperial powers at their own game. This doesn't just change Japan. It inspires revolutionaries across Asia and Africa, from Gandhi in India to future leaders in Vietnam and Egypt. Industrialization here becomes a political lighthouse for the global South. But it comes at a cost. As Japan gets stronger, it also gets imperial. You walk through a press office in Tokyo in 1910. A newspaper editor proudly lays out headlines about the annexation of Korea. Industrial strength feeds into militarism. Economic self-reliance turns into colonial ambition. Factories that once spun silk now churn out rifles, tanks, and propaganda. It's the double edge of modern industry. Growth and aggression, side by side. By the 1930s, Japan becomes a full-fledged imperial industrial state with all the contradictions that entails. You're in Osaka now. A city that once made umbrellas is now producing airplane parts. School children salute the flag every morning. And in the shadows, secret police keep tabs on dissidents who wonder if the emperor's dream has become a little too loud. Yet despite the darker chapters ahead, the Meiji transformation remains one of history's most staggering rewrites. From rice paddies to railroads, from kimonos to smokestacks, from isolation to global prominence. In just 2 generations, as the day ends, you sip a cup of hot sake under a glowing electric lantern. Somewhere nearby, a geisha strums a shamisen in G major. Overhead, a tram wire hums. Old Japan didn't vanish. It evolved, layered like lacquer, still present under every polished steel surface. And in that glimmer, in that delicate dance between cherry blossom and iron forge, you realize the Industrial Revolution here wasn't just a change in how things were made. It was a change in what it meant to be Japanese. You don't even notice the bulb at first. Just a soft amber glow, warm against the wallpaper, casting long shadows over a polished wood floor. The hum is faint, almost imperceptible, like a memory whispering behind your ear. But there it is, the electric light bulb, and it changes everything. Tonight, you drift into the tail end of the 19th century and the crackling start of the 20th. It's a world where the sky stops going dark at 6 p.m. and where sparks on copper wires begin to run entire cities. A world not lit by sun or fire, but by electrons humming obediently through the veins of civilization. Hey guys, tonight we flicker awake into a world just beginning to glow. You're going to feel the static, hear the buzz, and walk the streets of cities, learning how to never sleep again. And yes, you probably won't survive this if you're a candle maker. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. and what time your local night falls. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in Menlo Park, New Jersey, 1879. It smells like warm glass, burnt rubber, and the kind of coffee that's been sitting in a beaker since midnight. A thin man with a tired mustache and no time for sleep holds up a bulb that's been glowing for 13 straight hours. His assistants lean forward, jaws slack. Thomas Edison squints, nods once, and casually changes the world. Of course, it wasn't just Edison. Historians still argue whether Joseph Swan in Britain deserves equal credit, and he probably does. But the showman from New Jersey had a gift for packaging genius into headlines. And the light bulb, it's only the first domino. Electricity wasn't new. People had been shocking frogs' legs and creating lightning in jars since the 1700s. But before this moment, it was a party trick, a magician's novelty, not a grid. What's different now is distribution. Think of it like a nervous system for the modern world. Edison sets up the first power station at Pearl Street in Manhattan in 1882. Within months, electric lamps bloom in downtown hotels, factories, even some fancy homes. The streets stop going dark. It doesn't take long for others to jump in. Nikola Tesla, you know, the handsome wizard who probably time traveled, develops alternating current, a system that can travel much farther than Edison's direct current. Westinghouse backs him. The AC versus DC war begins. Imagine that. Geniuses flinging volts at each other across the country like sorcerers in a steampunk duel. Eventually, AC wins. It's more efficient, and it powers the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, dazzling millions with an electric landscape that looks like science fiction. The electric dawn has broken, and it's spreading. You're now walking through London in the 1890s. The fog is still here, thick as wool, but now it's pierced by flickering arc lamps over the Thames. Gas lamps are being phased out, and chimney sweeps are losing business. In Paris, they call it La Ville Lumière, the city of light. But now, that nickname isn't just about art, it's literal. Electric floodlights bathe the Eiffel Tower. Cafe signs start blinking. Couples sit under electric chandeliers and read until midnight. A quiet revolution. Time itself is becoming elastic. Factory shifts are no longer ruled by daylight. Stores stay open later. Newspapers print around the clock. Students study at night. Productivity soars. Insomnia is born. Oh, and it's not just lighting. Electricity starts dancing into motors, trams, elevators, and telephones. You ride an electric trolley through Berlin. You take a lift to the 4th floor in a New York hotel without climbing a single stair. You call your friend 2 blocks away and hear her laugh, live through a wire. It's magic, but it's also business. Back in the States, General Electric forms in 1892. Across the ocean, Siemens in Germany and AEG in France electrify Europe. Companies that once made telegraphs or sewing machines are now creating entire power grids. The economy hums with a new beat. Take streetcars, those clanging, sparking miracles. Once cities were walkable or horse-drawn. Now electric streetcars make it possible to live farther out and commute in. Suburbs are born. Real estate booms. Cities sprawl. And what powers those grids? Coal. You visit a power plant in 1900, and it's a monster. Coal smoke thick in the rafters. Giant steam turbines groaning like whales. Even green electricity runs on black lungs for now. But that's not what people see. They see freedom, speed, convenience, brightness. They see a future crackling with potential. Of course, not everyone's thrilled. Religious leaders warn that humans are defying divine order by banishing night. Doctors argue the light will ruin your eyesight or unhinge your nerves. And workers start to notice something troubling. The boss can now make your shift last way past sundown. The 8-hour workday starts to feel optional, if not fictional. Still, you can't put this genie back in the glass. Electricity becomes a social marker. You're rich? You have electric lighting and a phonograph. You're poor? You still burn oil or huddle around gas stoves. The light bulb becomes a symbol of class, until mass electrification efforts in the 20th century even the odds. One quirky side note. Cities become quieter too. Think about it. Electric trams replace horse hooves and iron wheels. Motors don't roar like steam. The air changes. Less clang, more hum. The soundtrack of urban life goes from percussion to ambient, weirdly relaxing if you ignore the factory whistles. Let's pause and visit a home kitchen in 1912. It's a modest place in Dayton, Ohio. There's a new electric toaster on the counter, still terrifying the dog. The radio isn't here yet, but a fan sits on the table, spanning lazily. The room smells of burnt bread and lemon polish. You can imagine a mother reading under a single bulb while her daughter turns the crank on a washing machine. The world is changing, but gently, room by room. This is how it happens, not just in factories or towers, but in homes, in habits, in what people do when the sun goes down. You don't sleep earlier anymore. You stay up. You read. You plan. You dream with the lights on. And here's the kicker. Electricity makes electricity possible. What? Yep. The electrification of society also speeds up the development of science and engineering. Labs stay open longer. Experiments become safer. Communication between universities speeds up. The pace of discovery itself accelerates. You've plugged into an exponential world. It's like that moment when you charge your phone and realize you can now call, read, listen, watch, shop, bank, photograph, and navigate. All because of a little current. Except this time, it's not just your phone, it's the planet. Let's end the night in Budapest. The year is 1900. A young inventor walks under an electric street lamp and jots an idea into a leather notebook. Across the Danube, the Parliament building glows like a ship made of gold. Behind him, an electric tram glides silently past a cathedral built before Columbus set sail. That's what this dawn feels like. Not a rupture, but a superimposition. The old and the new, side by side. Stone and wire. Candle and filament. Organ and phonograph. The world didn't wake up all at once, but one by one, the lights began to flicker on. You're sitting at a desk, probably near a stack of paper. Maybe you've got a pen in your hand. But let's imagine for a moment that the paper is infinite. The pen never runs dry, and you can calculate 1,000 times faster than your own brain. Now take that thought and give it electricity. Welcome to the dawn of machines that think. Well, sort of think. But back in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, even basic computation seemed like sorcery. As cities lit up with electricity, a quieter, brainier revolution was humming away in offices, labs, and war rooms. One that would give birth to the computer. You ready for this one? It's going to be a little less smoky than coal and steam, and a whole lot more abstract. But don't worry, I'll be with you all the way. Get comfy. Wiggle your toes under the blanket. This isn't science fiction. This is real. And it begins not with blinking screens, but with census workers. It's 1889, and the United States Census Bureau has a problem. The country's growing like a weed after rain, and hand counting every person is just too slow. It took 7 years to tally the 1880 census. 7. Enter Herman Hollerith, a young engineer with a simple but genius idea. What if you stored data on punch cards? Tiny holes in stiff paper, each pattern representing age, gender, job, or birthplace. You feed the cards into an electric tabulating machine, and it counts the holes with a metal pin, completing in days what took humans years. Boom. Data processing is born, and Hollerith, his company, eventually morphs into a little outfit you might have heard of called IBM. Yep, from hole punch cards to the mainframes that ran Cold War simulations, and eventually the laptops we overheat with open tabs. IBM was there from the very beginning, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's pause in the 1930s. You're in Cambridge, sitting in a chilly room with a moody, brilliant man named Alan Turing. He's fiddling with notepads, logic puzzles, and a concept so brain-bending that most of his peers don't fully get it yet. He proposes a universal machine, one that could simulate the logic of any other machine, given the right set of instructions. What he's describing isn't just a calculator, it's theoretical computing, the blueprint for what every computer does today. Input, process, output. Turing isn't building it, yet, but he's setting the intellectual bedrock. Logic circuits, conditional branching, memory storage, these ideas are now floating in the air like static, and within a decade, the world will need those ideas more than ever. Enter World War II. The world's on fire, and suddenly, thinking machines aren't academic. They're urgent. You're in Bletchley Park, England. Brick walls, cigarette smoke, endless tea. Behind locked doors, Turing and a team of codebreakers are using electromechanical beasts like the bomb machine to break Nazi Enigma codes. This isn't movie magic. They're literally saving thousands of lives a day by intercepting and decoding German messages faster than they can be used. And they're doing it using logic circuits, rotors, and the first hints of programmable automation. Meanwhile, in the US, a machine called ENIAC is being born. It's the size of a small apartment, 30 tons, 17,000 vacuum tubes. And it's the first general-purpose electronic computer, designed originally to calculate artillery trajectories. ENIAC can do in 30 seconds what a room of math PhDs would take hours to do. It's ugly. It's hot. It eats electricity like candy. But it works. The computer age is here. Now take a breath. Because once the war ends, that raw calculating power isn't just for governments and generals anymore. It starts to trickle down to universities, to corporations, to anyone with big questions and enough money to ask them. And suddenly, you've got engineers pushing boundaries. In 1947, transistors replace vacuum tubes. They're smaller, cheaper, and way more reliable. The same way the light bulb beat the gas lamp, the transistor beats the clunky tube. It's the difference between carrying a library and carrying a matchbook. Then comes integrated circuits in the 1950s. Think, entire boards of components shrunken onto a silicon chip. That's when things really start to accelerate. And it's all happening behind the scenes. While the public listens to records or watches Lucille Ball on their black and white TVs, behind the curtain, computers are getting smaller, faster, and, crucially, programmable. Let's peek inside a 1960s office. There's a giant metal cabinet humming in the corner. The IBM System 360. It's not personal yet. It runs on punch cards and magnetic tape. It costs more than your entire neighborhood. But it can do payroll, process insurance claims, and run simulations. It's the beginning of corporate computing. And then, in a very nerdy garage in California, something quietly radical happens. A couple of scrappy tech rebels start thinking, what if computers didn't need punch cards? What if people could interact with them directly? So they build a screen, a keyboard, a mouse. And suddenly, the computer isn't just a machine that thinks. It's a machine that listens. You're holding its descendant in your pocket right now. Back to the big picture. By the end of the 20th century, machines can beat humans at chess, handle complex mathematical proofs, simulate weather, design bridges, manage airline traffic. Are they thinking? Well, that depends on your definition, but they're definitely processing faster, storing more, and learning patterns better than we ever expected. And it's only a matter of time before something wild happens. The line between calculator and cognitive machine begins to blur. That's where we're heading in the next section. But for tonight, let's drift off here in a quiet lab, fluorescent lights buzzing, a mainframe purring like a metal dragon. A graduate student dozes in her chair, a cup of black coffee cooling beside a keyboard. The machine runs overnight, humming softly as it solves a problem no human ever could. She'll wake up to a neat line of code. But tonight, the machine is the one doing the work. And outside the window, the city sleeps, unaware that their thoughts are already being outsourced, not to other people, but to machines. Welcome to the age of computation. You open your eyes. The room is still. Somewhere in the darkness, a soft light blinks. A modem, maybe, or a phone on silent charge. But listen closer. The world is humming, whirring, whispering to itself in code and current. Because tonight, you're in the era where speed becomes God. And this God is greedy. It wants faster circuits, tighter code, higher throughput. Seconds are now lifetimes, and anything slower than now is already dead. Machines no longer just think, they race. You ready? This section's going to move fast. Fitting, right? Let's rewind to the 1970s. A decade of bell-bottoms, Cold War nerves, and the birth of something small, boxy, and unassuming. The microprocessor. Suddenly, a computer's brain doesn't take up a room. It fits on your palm. Intel drops the 4004 in 1971, then the 8080, then Motorola's 68000. These aren't just chips, they're revolutions on silicon. Computers go from thing behind locked doors to thing you could, hypothetically, have in your house. And guess what? Some nerds do just that. Like Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs, cobbling together the Apple I in a garage. Or the scrappy folks at Commodore and Tandy and IBM, who figure there might be a market for these weird machines beyond hobbyists. They're right. By the 1980s, computing is personal. You've got chunky beige boxes blinking awake on office desks and bedroom floors. You hear the whir of floppy disks, the clack of mechanical keyboards, the squawk of a dial-up modem trying to handshake with something out in the ether. It's not just about access now. It's about speed, faster boot-ups, faster processing, faster everything. Now zoom out. This isn't just a consumer craze. Governments and industries are in a full-blown arms race of information. Think back to the Cold War. Spies and satellites are one thing, but whoever processes data fastest wins. Missiles, simulations, financial systems. It all comes down to computational velocity. In this era, the fastest computer is a symbol of national power, like a flag on the moon or a nuclear sub under the Arctic. And the Japanese? They're not messing around. By the late 80s, Japan's fifth-generation computer systems project is investing billions to leapfrog American machines in AI and speed. They don't quite crack it, but they light a fire under US developers. Moore's Law, the prediction that computing power doubles roughly every 2 years, becomes a prophecy engineers follow like scripture. Transistors shrink. Processing power grows. The machines start running faster than the people who built them, and no one wants to be left behind. Here's a sensory image for you. You're standing in a server farm in the early 2000s. Racks stretch like endless metal hedges. Cool air blows in controlled gusts. LEDs flicker like fireflies on speed. Every second, these machines process petabytes of information. Airline routes, bank transactions, online searches, supply chains, nuclear protocols. You can smell the ozone, hear the fans whine. This isn't just infrastructure. It's a cathedral of speed. And speed has become sacred. In 2004, Google unveils a new product, Gmail. Free email, a gigabyte of storage, blazing fast search. By 2007, Apple drops the iPhone. You swipe, you tap, you Google, post, call, and calculate, all in one pocket-sized miracle. And the faster the phones get, the more we demand. Every second of lag is an insult. Every buffering wheel feels like a betrayal. It's not enough for your phone to work. It needs to feel instantaneous. A delay longer than 0.1 seconds. Your brain notices and complains. You want real-time directions, instant messages, and high-res streaming at 35,000 feet in a thunderstorm. And the machines, they're trying to keep up. Let's talk about trading. Not the kind with coins and scrolls. The kind with algorithms. By the 2010s, stock markets aren't really run by people. They're run by bots, high-frequency trading programs that make decisions in microseconds. In this world, speed isn't just power, it's profit. Firms spend hundreds of millions to shave nanoseconds off transmission times. They build straight-line fiber cables from Chicago to New York. They buy real estate closer to data centers. They race electrons, all for a head start measured in billions of a second. And when the flash crashes hit, the market tumbles, not because people panic, but because machines twitch. It's the speed age, and nobody blinks anymore. But here's the catch. As machines go faster, humans slow down. Or maybe just get overwhelmed. Think about it. We used to get the news once a day, on paper. Now it arrives in notifications. We used to write letters, wait weeks for replies. Now we send a dozen messages an hour. We binge entire seasons in one weekend. Refresh feeds like slot machines. Speed has become normal, expected, worshipped. And yet, we're more anxious, less focused, and always waiting for the next thing. Funny, isn't it? The faster the world goes, the more restless we feel. Maybe that's the curse of serving a speed god. It always wants more. Still with me. Now consider this. Some historians debate whether Moore's law is dying, that we're reaching physical limits, that atoms can't shrink much more, that speed, maybe, can't increase forever. But others disagree. They point to quantum computing, optical circuits, neural nets, all the weird, experimental stuff lurking in the labs. Historians still argue whether the pursuit of speed is a technological imperative or a cultural addiction. Either way, the machines don't stop. They get faster, smarter, hungrier, and they're starting to learn on their own. But let's save that thought. For now, stretch out. Let your breath slow. The god of speed can't find you here, under your blanket, in this pause between centuries. And as you drift, remember, somewhere, right now, a computer is processing data in 0.001 seconds. It's doing it for someone. Someday, it might do it for itself. You breathe in, somewhere in the back of your mind. Gears grind. Pipes rattle. You hear shouting in the distance. Chanting, maybe. Voices raised in unison. A rhythm of protest. Don't worry, you're still safe in bed. But your mind? It's wandering straight into the heart of a factory. The floor slick with oil. The air tinged with coal smoke and sweat. A place where bodies ache and time is carved into shift whistles. The machine runs, and you're part of it until you're not. Tonight, you're stepping into the moment workers decide to fight back. Let's rewind to the early 1800s, back when industrialization was still brand new, still dazzling, still terrifying. Steam engines wheezed to life, spinning looms clattered through the night, and cities like Manchester, Birmingham, and Lowell began to pulse with the rhythm of labor. You're not a master here. You're a worker, maybe a weaver who used to work from home, proud and independent, until the spinning frame stole your craft. Or maybe a 12-year-old boy working in a coal mine, shoulders raw from dragging wagons through tunnels too narrow for adults. Maybe you're a young woman in a cotton mill, fingers nimble and bleeding, hair tied back so it doesn't get caught in the spools. You work long, you earn little, you breathe dust, and for a while, there's silence, because fear is loud. Fear of losing your job, of being blacklisted, of starving. And there are always more people arriving from the countryside or across the sea, willing to take your place. But then comes the noise. Let's start with the Luddites. Yeah, that word you probably think means technophobe, or someone who hates smartphones. But in 1811, being a Luddite meant something way more radical. It meant breaking into a factory at night with a hammer and smashing the machines that were replacing you. These were skilled textile workers in England, furious that the new power looms let unskilled laborers do in a day what used to take weeks. Furious that owners raked in profits while workers starved. So they fought back, not against technology, but against how it was used. They didn't hate machines. They hated being made obsolete. The government responded, let's say, not gently. The Frame-Breaking Act of 1812 made machine smashing punishable by death. Soldiers were sent in. Dozens were hanged. Others exiled. The rebellion was crushed, but the idea, it lingered, grew, got louder, entered the chartists. Fast forward to the 1830s and 40s. Britain is now fully industrial. Its cities choking on smoke and inequality. Workers aren't smashing machines anymore. They're writing charters. The People's Charter of 1838 demanded things that today sound, well, basic. The right to vote for all men, secret ballots, pay for members of parliament so normal folks could run, equal-sized voting districts, annual elections. A little ambitious, that one. Millions signed petitions. Some paraded, some rioted. Chartism was a mass movement, loud and complex. It failed, technically, but every demand except the last one eventually became law. They didn't win then, but they planted seeds. Now hop the pond. Over in America, factory life was no picnic either. In Lowell, Massachusetts, teenage girls, known as the Lowell Mill Girls, worked 13-hour shifts for a few dollars a week. The air buzzed with lint. The looms never stopped. And the dormitories were grim. But these girls, they organized. In the 1830s and 1840s, they went on strike. They published newsletters. They formed one of the first labor reform associations, run by women. One wrote, "We have listened too long to the loud boasting of the superior worth of capital." Bold, right? They didn't just ask for better wages. They demanded dignity. Let's fast forward again to the late 19th century. The second industrial revolution is in full swing. Steel, oil, and electricity are the new gods. Cities stretch upward with skyscrapers and outward with railroads. And beneath it all, labor. You can hear the clang of Pittsburgh steel, the hiss of Chicago slaughterhouses, the roar of New York docks. Enter the Knights of Labor, founded in 1869. They're not your usual guild. They welcome men and women, black and white, skilled and unskilled. Their motto? An injury to one is the concern of all. They want 8-hour workdays, fair pay, end to child labor, safety, radical stuff for the time. By 1886, they have 750,000 members. And then, disaster. Let's talk about the Haymarket Affair. Chicago, May 4th, 1886. A peaceful labor rally. People calling for shorter work days. Police arrive. Then someone, no one's quite sure who, throws a bomb. Chaos. Police open fire. Protesters flee. 7 cops and at least 4 civilians are killed. The press blames anarchists. 8 men are arrested. Some weren't even at the rally. 4 are hanged. 1 kills himself in prison. Historians still argue whether the accused were guilty or just convenient scapegoats. But Haymarket changes everything. It scares the public. fractures the labor movement. And yet, it also becomes a global symbol of resistance. To this day, May 1st, International Workers' Day, is rooted in Haymarket, and then comes Pullman. In 1894, workers at the Pullman Palace Car Company strike over wage cuts and high rent in company-owned housing. The American Railway Union, led by Eugene V. Debs, joins in. The strike spreads. Trains stop. Mail stops. The government freaks. President Cleveland sends in federal troops. Riots erupt. Dozens die. Debs is arrested, but the movement grows. By the turn of the century, unions are here to stay. The American Federation of Labor, AFL, rises, focusing on skilled workers and pragmatic gains. Strikes become more coordinated. Labor Day becomes a federal holiday. You know, to celebrate all the workers who got shot at. Cool, right? Now hold up. This story isn't just men in smokestacks and unions in bowler hats. Let's take a sidebar to some unsung organizers. Lucy Parsons, a black Mexican-American anarchist, widow of one of the Haymarket martyrs, described by the police as more dangerous than 1,000 rioters. Mother Jones, who helped miners organize in coal towns across Appalachia and once led a march of child laborers to the White House. And yes, immigrants, black workers, women, and children, all pushing labor forward, while often being left out of the official story. These people didn't just demand higher wages, they demanded to be seen. By the early 20th century, strikes are a regular feature of life. Steel strikes, coal strikes, teacher strikes, general strikes. Some win, some fail, some end in violence. Like the Ludlow Massacre of 1914, where Colorado militiamen attacked a tent colony of striking miners, killing women and children. But slowly, surely, laws begin to change. The Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 finally sets the 8-hour workday, outlaws child labor, establishes minimum wage. It's progress, but always uphill. So here we are. You're lying still, drifting between centuries. And out there, workers are still organizing. The gig economy, warehouse pickers, teachers, nurses, baristas. Labor isn't a relic. It's not a coal smudge on the lens of progress. It's now, because no matter how shiny the machine gets, someone's still expected to keep it running. And sometimes, that someone decides they've had enough. So they raise their voice, join hands, and march. Close your eyes. The coal dust still hasn't cleared from your clothes, has it? You can feel the grime under your fingernails, the static charge of railroads and smokestacks still humming in your ears. You've walked the floor of the mill, struck the bell of labor, heard the roar of machines. And now the earth is coughing. It's 1952. You're in London, and a strange yellow-gray fog hugs the city like a wool blanket soaked in ash. You think it's just another bad week of weather, until people start choking, gasping, dying. The Great Smog of London kills over 12,000 people in 4 days. It's not just fog. It's coal smoke, sulfur dioxide, soot, and cold air locking everything in place. The sun vanishes. Street lamps barely cut the haze. By the end, the city is a ghost town. Nature doesn't scream, it just chokes. And for the first time in the modern industrial age, people start to understand. The machine fights back. Let's take a step back. For 2 centuries now, the Industrial Revolution has been transforming everything. Power, food, work, cities, comfort. But it also transformed the planet. The numbers were there. CO2 rising, forests shrinking, rivers turning black. But nobody wanted to talk about it. Industrial progress was holy. The factory was the cathedral. Oil was the sacrament. You could build a future that glowed electric in the dark, but it might mean burning the past into the ground. Then, in 1962, a voice cuts through. You're holding a slim book. Its cover soft from too many readings. It's called Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. It doesn't shout. It whispers, and that's what makes it terrifying. Carson writes of a future spring without birdsong, where pesticides like DDT have poisoned the insects, and the birds that eat them, and the land that holds them. She shows you how the green revolution is killing the green. The chemical companies call her a liar, a fanatic, a hysterical woman. But her words stick, and suddenly, millions of people, ordinary people, start asking, what are we doing to the earth? Cue the drums, cue the signs, cue the planet waking up. You're now in the 1970s, and the protests are no longer just about labor or war. They're about air, water, trees, animals, life. It's April 26th, 1970, the first Earth Day. 20 million people take to the streets. That's 1 in every 10 Americans at the time. From New York to San Francisco, from school kids to senators, they march. Clean air, clean water. Save the whales, protect the forests. Think globally, act locally. They're not radicals. They're students, teachers, moms with strollers. They don't hate progress. They just wanted to stop killing everything. That same year, the US government creates the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Endangered Species Act. Laws start popping up like spring weeds, regulating, restricting, rescuing. But industry doesn't go quietly. Let's be honest, pollution was profitable. Toxic runoff didn't cost anything if you could dump it in a river. Carbon emissions were free. Plastic was cheap. The market didn't care about future generations, only quarterly profits. And so, the fight moved from the streets to the courts, from megaphones to spreadsheets. Lobbyists started reshaping the conversation. Words like global warming were twisted into political footballs. Science became negotiable. But the Earth kept talking. 1984, Bhopal, India. A pesticide plant leaks 40 tons of methyl isocyanate gas. Thousands die in the night. Children, grandparents, workers asleep in slums. The worst industrial disaster in history. 1986, Chernobyl. A nuclear reactor melts down in Ukraine, releasing invisible poison into the air. Radiation sweeps across Europe. Forests near the blast site die. Children are born with deformities. The word fallout becomes literal. 1989, Exxon Valdez. An oil tanker crashes off the coast of Alaska, spilling 11 million gallons of crude oil. Seabirds soaked in black sludge. Otters dying in silence. It takes decades to clean up, and some damage never heals. 1991, Kuwaiti oil fires. As Saddam Hussein's troops retreat, they ignite hundreds of oil wells. For months, the sky over the Persian Gulf is black. It rains oil. It snows ash. Satellite photos look like the Earth is bleeding. So where are we now? Let's zoom in on the late 20th century. You hear words like climate change, acid rain, ozone hole, deforestation, carbon footprint. The planet becomes a chart, a data stream, a projection. We track melting glaciers like stock prices, and into that mess walks a teenager. You're in Sweden. It's 2018. A quiet girl with long braids holds a cardboard sign. Skull strike for klimatet. School strike for climate. Her name is Greta Thunberg. She says nothing for a long time. Then she speaks. You say you love your children above all else, and yet you are stealing their future. And suddenly, the earth isn't just protesting, it's organizing. Millions of young people follow, march, strike, demand, chant. The world listens. Sort of. You're in the 2020s now. The earth protests through wildfire, flood, heat wave, drought. Australia burns. California chokes. Venice floods. Arctic ice vanishes. You're watching polar bears starve on YouTube. You're watching hurricanes get names faster than meteorologists can track them. You're buying reusable straws. You're recycling. You're anxious, but there's also hope, quiet and steady. Solar panels bloom on rooftops. Offshore wind farms spin. Cities declare climate emergencies. Carbon markets rise. Billionaires try to build electric cars. Even oil companies start pretending to be green. The world turns. The world wakes. The world still waits. And here you are, lying still, breathing soft, knowing the earth doesn't scream. It warns. The same steam that once powered locomotives now warms oceans. The same coal that built empires now melts ice caps. The same progress that lit up cities now darkens forests. But maybe, just maybe, we listen this time. Maybe we remember that the earth isn't a resource. It's home. And it's not asking for permission. It's asking for change. You let that thought settle. Let the wind carry it. Let the night soften. Because tomorrow the earth will still be here. Question is, Will we be listening? Let your breath sink. We're at the edge now. You've ridden the spinning gears of empire and invention, marched through smokestacks and strike lines, seen nature's fury rise from under oil-slicked oceans and coal-bitten skies. And now you're here, in the world we made, a place of paradox, a planet choked with microchips and megacities, where billionaires build rockets to escape, and farmers still pray for rain. A world both miraculous and on fire, richer than ever, more anxious than ever, fast, loud, crowded, alone. But before we leap forward, let's take one last step back. It's 1989. The Berlin Wall is coming down. The Cold War sputters to an end, and you can feel the tectonic plates of power shifting. Communism cracks. The global marketplace swings its doors wide open. Factories move east, south, overseas. Labor gets cheaper. Borders blur. It's the age of globalization. A factory in Detroit becomes a field. A factory in Shenzhen becomes a city. Capital flows across oceans like weather now. Corporations become empires. Nike, Apple, Amazon. You can order a phone built in 6 countries and assembled by hands that speak 6 languages. But there's a price. The same systems that lifted billions out of poverty also hollowed out whole communities. Steel towns rusted. Main streets emptied. Work got less secure. Wages froze. Inequality stretched like a rubber band nearing its snap. Booms got bigger. So did busts. Let's talk about 2008. You're sipping burnt coffee in a fluorescent-lit office. The market's shaky. Then it collapses. The Great Recession hits like a punch to the gut. Lehman Brothers falls. Banks buckle. The housing bubble bursts. Millions lose homes, savings, faith. Whole countries teeter. Greece riots. Iceland jails its bankers. Everywhere else, the rich mostly walk away. You watch politicians promise reform and then bail out the culprits. It's not just a financial crisis, it's a moral one. A generation looks at capitalism and asks, is this what we're building? And just when it starts to stabilize, boom, it's 2020. A virus sweeps the globe. COVID-19 locks down cities, halts flights, closes borders, streets empty, hospitals overflow, supermarkets ration toilet paper, and in the eerie silence, something remarkable happens. Dolphins return to canals, skies clear over Delhi. The earth, briefly, shockingly, breathes. You realize how fragile everything is, how quickly the systems can stop, how connected and isolated we all are. You zoom into work, you bake sourdough, you check death tolls like stock prices, you rethink everything. The early 21st century is a time of acceleration. Technology spins forward, faster than laws, ethics, or understanding can keep up. You've got artificial intelligence that paints pictures and answers emails, drones that deliver groceries, algorithms that know what you'll watch next, and maybe how you'll vote. Money becomes invisible. Cryptocurrency, NFTs, the metaverse. We have more data than any civilization in history. More cameras, more clicks, more dopamine loops, and still more loneliness. Because for all this progress, the human questions remain. What is a good life? What is enough? Who gets to decide? And now, beyond. The Industrial Revolution is long gone, but its heartbeat echoes in every smartphone, every shipping container, every climate policy, every digital ad. The story hasn't ended, it's evolving. A new revolution is already underway. Clean energy, quantum computing, genetic editing, virtual reality. We're learning to rewire the body, hack the mind, simulate the universe. But here's the truth. Whispered between the lines of history, every leap forward comes with a cost. Every machine hums with moral questions. Every boom eventually busts. Unless we change the rhythm. So maybe this is where the story pivots. From extraction to restoration. From empire to community. From endless growth to sustainable balance. Maybe we plant more than we tear up. Build, not just for profit, but for people. Value not just efficiency, but empathy. Maybe the next revolution isn't industrial or digital. Maybe it's human. You breathe deeply. The gears are quieter now. The cities still buzz, but there's green between the glass towers. The night is still filled with light, but also with thought. You lie still, cocooned in this moment. Part past, part future, part stardust, and soot, and story. Because history never really ends. It just waits for someone to dream the next chapter. And maybe that someone is you. Good night, traveler. Sleep well. The world will still be turning when you wake.